Welcome back to Grimoire Audiobooks. Today, we delve deeper into the thrilling tale of Harry Potter and the Masters of Time by Sarah 1281, covering Part 3, Chapters 21 to 30. This fanfiction, set in the hilarious and chaotic universe of Oh God, Not Again, takes Harry Potter and his friends on a time-twisting adventure where every decision could change the course of magical history. As the stakes grow higher, Harry must navigate complex timelines, surprising alliances, and moments of hilarity amidst the chaos. In these chapters, expect shocking revelations, laugh-out-loud scenarios, and moments of pure brilliance as the Masters of Time continue their unpredictable journey. Sarah 1281 is renowned for their impeccable humor, creative storytelling, and masterful exploration of alternate timelines. Their ability to weave comedy with thought-provoking narrative makes them a standout in the fanfiction community. Disclaimer: this fanfiction is a transformative work based on J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series. All original characters, settings, and trademarks belong to their respective owners. This reading is created purely for entertainment, with no copyright infringement intended. So, sit back, relax, and prepare for a magical roller coaster with Harry Potter and the Masters of Time by Sarah 1281 at Grimoire Audiobooks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more magical adventures. And remember, after 25 likes and 25 comments, the next part will come your way. Let's dive into the next chapter of this time-twisting journey. Chapter 21. That night Ron and Hermione rushed into the common room half an hour after curfew, their eyes sparkling, with Neville trailing behind, looking rather disconcerted. So, Harry began, genuinely curious. How did it go? It went great, Ron enthused. Little bugger confessed to everything. I'm still not sure that it was Neville began, only to be cut off by Hermione. Oh, come on, Neville. You were there. You heard him. What more proof do you need? Hermione asked him, exasperated. Clearly, this had been an ongoing discussion between them on the way back. Oh, I don't know, some proof? Neville suggested sarcastically. I admit that what we've heard is damning, and I wouldn't put it past Malfoy to try something like this, but still. He's 12. And it's not like he's exactly criminal mastermind material, either. Maybe you guys should start from the beginning, Harry proposed. And I can be the fair and unbiased judge. Fair and unbiased. Ron snorted. You like Malfoy, remembers? I like you more, Harry retorted, rolling his eyes. Although Draco is less prone to jumping to conclusions. No one says jumping to conclusions anymore, Parvati said as she walked past them on her way to the girls' dormitory. Yeah, everyone knows it's skydiving, Lavender added, hurrying after her friend. Once they left, Harry and his friends were the only people left in the common room, and they could begin their tale. We got off to kind of a late start because Ron insisted that I use some of Pansy's hair that you apparently just happened to have with you instead of Millicent's, despite the fact that Millicent was staying over break and Pansy wasn't, Hermione began, glaring slightly at Ron for inconveniencing her. Hey, don't look at me, Ron said, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. It was Harry's idea, and if Harry said that the hairs you had belonged to Millicent's cat, then it's best not to take chances. Besides, it's not like Malfoy even noticed that you weren't supposed to be there. That is true, Hermione mused. I don't think he likes her very much. And who can blame her? Ron laughed. Malfoy's a git. She said Draco didn't like Pansy, not vice versa, Harry corrected, somewhat reluctant to break the flow of their narrative lest they get sidetracked, and this ended up taking all night. Oh. Well, he's still a git, Ron said. Regardless of whether or not Hermione needed to use Pansy's hair, or what Malfoy and Pansy feel for each other, Neville interjected pointedly. We soon realized we had no idea where the Slytherin common room was. Why didn't you just ask me? Harry asked. Why would you know where the Slytherin common room is? Hermione asked. Because Draco is a friend of mine? Harry offered. Harry, do you remember that little conversation you had with Malfoy at the end of last year about stalking? She asked sweetly. Nope, not at all, Harry lied. You were saying Neville's?
Right.
We hadn't thought to ask you, although I realized that you would probably know because you're obsessive like that, and there really wasn't enough time for us to go back, find you, and then interrogate Malfoy. Considering I hadn't moved and you had an entire bloody castle to look through, I'm not so sure about that, Harry disagreed. How are we supposed to know you were planning to stay in the Great Halls? Ron asked rhetorically. We saw Luna coming up to talk to you, and she might very well have convinced you to go visit those invisible zombie horses she keeps going on about. They're called Thestrals, Ron, Harry said stiffly. And everyone knows the best time to visit them is at daybreak. I've been meaning to ask you about that, actually, mate, Ron continued. I mean, I know that you both say that you can see them, but neither of you is quite right in the head, and as nobody else seems to be able to, how do we know that you're not just seeing things? Or making them up? Harry groaned. Great. Only 2 years in, and I'm already being accused of being a lying schizophrenic. It's nice to know some things never change.
What?
Hermione asked, looking vaguely disturbed by Harry's implication that he'd been accused of having mental problems before. Oh, nothing, Harry said dismissively, deciding against mentioning his psychic scar for once. And, of course, Luna and I aren't the only ones who can see Thestrals. I know for sure that Theodore Nott can see them, as well as most of the adults. Well, Nott's a Slytherin, ain't he? Ron shrugged. None of them are right in the head. And don't you think the adults would have mentioned something if they had invisible zombie horses pulling the carriages? Not to mention why in the world they would have such bad omens working here, when they could just enchant the carriages to pull themselves, Hermione added. Plus it would be cheaper and less maintenance. That would be the sensible course of action, wouldn't it? Harry agreed cheerfully. Which is why it has never occurred to any of them. Ever. Luna and Harry aren't the only ones who can see Thestrals, Neville said quietly. You mean you can? Ron asked, looking concerned. At Neville's reluctant nod, he began pulling him towards the door. We'd better get you to Madame Pomfrey. I can't believe I didn't notice anything was off with you. You must think I'm the worst friend ever. Oh well, hopefully this is just because of stress dash. I'm not hallucinating, Ron, Neville told him, sounding faintly amused. No, you're just seeing invisible zombie horses, Ron countered. You don't believe in Thestrals, Ron? That's funny. I could have sworn I heard Harry say something about them being in the Quibbler, Hermione sniped. Harry, who had been feeling ignored, opened his mouth to say that he had said no such thing because Thestrals, despite how invisible, zombie-ish, and horse-like they were, just didn't make very interesting news. Particularly as anyone who had made it through OWL's care of magical creatures could tell you that they were real. Before he could get a word in edgewise, however, Ron continued. I don't believe everything in the Quibbler, Hermione, could have fooled me. I just don't see how invisible zombie horses are any harder to believe in than, say, the Rotfong conspiracy, Hermione shot back. I knew it! Harry burst out. All this time you've been looking down at us for reading the Quibbler. But you read it too. I have proof. Ron, Hermione, and Neville just stared at him. Shutting up now. Thestrals are real. Neville took advantage of the silence Harry's abrupt outburst had caused. You can only see them if you've seen death, however, so not many people our age know about them. I'd hazard a guess that most of the staff would be able to see them, especially given the war. How can Harry see them? Hermione asked. Surely, he would have mentioned it if he'd seen someone die. Harry vaguely wondered why it was more surprising that he'd seen death than Neville. All things considering, she should think the opposite. Hermione? I did tell you. Quirrell, remember? Neville and I both saw it. But I could see them before. I saw my parents die. There was a silence. Then, when you were one, mate, Ron pointed out, with all the tact of a blind troll. Harry rolled his eyes. So? I still saw it. But you couldn't possibly have let their deaths and the implications sink in at that age, and so there is no way that could have allowed you to see Thestrals, Ron replied. I thought you didn't believe in Thestrals, Hermione said a little smugly. I didn't. I grew up in a wizarding home, though, so I've still heard about them. Charlie loves exotic creatures like that, Ron explained. If your brother told you about them, why didn't you believe in them? Neville wanted to know. Because it sounds like something out of those bad Muggle horror movies Dad sometimes watches, Ron admitted. He loves the TV. TV, Ron. Harry corrected automatically. That was interesting. If Ron's father's primary source of Muggle knowledge came from cable, that would explain a lot. Anyway, we've somehow gotten horribly off topic, so, again, finding the Slytherin common rooms, Neville said pointedly. We ran into this girl, and I tried asking where the Slytherin common rooms were but I stopped him, Hermione interrupted. Because I recognized her as the Ravenclaw prefect Penelope Clearwater, and even though people might believe Crabbe and Goyle were stupid enough to forget where their common room was, Penelope wouldn't be able to help. You know, you'd think that prefects would know where the other common rooms are in case of emergencies, Harry mused. Come to think of it, why in the world are the common rooms hidden and passwords set up? Unless they feel that Polyjuice Potion or Metamorphoguses are enough of a problem to warrant the extra secrecy, couldn't the portraits just visually ID anyone and maybe putting passwords on the dormitories? And for that matter, how is it fair that just because the Ravenclaws are the most studious, they should have to answer some bizarre and abstract riddle every time they want to leave their common room? I mean, honestly, one wrong answer, and you're stuck outside? It's a wonder anyone wants to be a Ravenclaw at all. Yeah, that's great, Harry, Neville told him. Not sure I want to know where you're getting your information, but try to stay focused. Oh, that's rich coming from you. You haven't even gotten to the Slytherin common room, and we've been talking for over 10 minutes, Harry retorted. I'm staying on topic just fine, Neville said defensively. It's Ron and Hermione who won't stop bickering. Casting a quick glance at the twin looks of indignation on the faces of the pair in question, he quickly pressed forth. After Penelope left, we ran into Percy and Ron may, or may not have started a blood feud between the House of Crabbe and the House of Weasley. That is so not my fault, Ron protested. Harry shot him a look. He didn't know what happened, but he was fairly sure that whatever Ron had said had been entirely his own fault, as that was the way these things tended to work. Also, he was beginning to wish that he had gone with them after all, if for no other reason than so he could already know what happened instead of having this drag on. Almost, but not quite. After all, he and Luna had fun. Still, this was taking quite a while. Perhaps he should look into getting a pensive? Okay, it might have been slightly my fault, Ron relented, flushing. But how was I supposed to know that he'd take such offense to my teasing him about Penelope? Oh, I don't know, Hermione said sarcastically. Because you weren't his brother, but some random troll like second year, and weren't sounding like you respected his authority? But I don't Ron began. And you're his brother, so that's okay, Neville told him. But coming from Crabbe, you know how seriously Percy takes his prefect status. Yeah. Ron grumbled. At least you seem to enjoy blood feuds. Harry tried to console him. Ron looked perplexed. Oh, come on. I've seen how much you enjoy bantering with Draco. In fact, I think I'll keep a close eye on you too when you start going through puberty, just to make sure all of this isn't just UST. Hermione, clearly the only one to understand the acronym, giggled. Ron opened his mouth angrily to demand clarification, but Neville just shook his head and put a hand over Ron's mouth. We're probably better off not knowing, he said seriously. Ron seemed to agree. Right after Percy stormed off, Malfoy showed up. He took us down to the dungeons, which is apparently where the Slytherin common room is, and, I gotta say, sucks to be them, especially this time of year. Malfoy mocked us for forgetting where the common room was, and then immediately proceeded to not remember the password. Hermione told him what it was and Wait, Harry interrupted, grinning. Hermione Granger, Gryffindor Golden Girl, told Draco Malfoy, Slytherin bad boy, the password to his common room? What were we talking about earlier about stalking? Oh, so now you remember that. Hermione rolled her eyes. Typical. And I just suggested pure blood because it's Slytherin, and it was the first thing that came to mind.
She paused.
Well, after Basilisk, but under the circumstances, I didn't think Professor Dumbledore would let them get away with being so gauche. The minute we were in the common room, Malfoy, who seems to enjoy his blood feud with the Weasleys nearly as much as Ron does, began to talk about how much a disgrace he thought they were and how Mr. Weasley should go off and become a muggle. Then he mentioned that the reason he was so upset was that Mr. Weasley had conducted a raid of his house a little while back, and even though they hadn't found anything, there were apparently several dark artifacts hidden in the Malfoys' drawing room. Not for long. I sent a letter to Dad, Ron said, sounding extremely pleased with himself. So? Harry asked. Even if he knows that the Malfoys are hiding something, he can't very well act on it. Why not? Ron asked. He can just go back and raid Malfoy Manor again. No, he can't, Ron, Harry said, shaking his head. A raid once when other houses were being raided might be okay. To go back, though, you'd need evidence. But I do have evidence. I heard Dash. That's all very well and good, Ron, Harry said patiently. Even if you completely ignore the fact that all of this is hearsay, how are you going to explain how you got the information? Are you going to mention that you, Neville, and Hermione drugged 2 fellow students and impersonated them? Or perhaps you dosed him with Veritaserum? God knows no one would believe that Draco told you willingly, nor that he would be so careless as to talk about it outside of the confines of his common room. Mr. Malfoy might get a fine, lose a few possessions, but you 3 could get suspended if not outright expelled. Ron's face paled. I never thought of that. Hermione was so enraged by this eventuality that she could do no more than glare daggers at Ron. It's highly unlikely Malfoy's father will either, Neville said finally. I mean, purebloods like him are more used to bribing their way out of trouble than using the law to their advantage. Still, Harry said thoughtfully, it might be nice to know you're in the right for once. I'll mention it to Draco in the morning. But Harry, Ron sulked. Do the words, drugged and impersonated, mean nothing to you? Harry shook his head. Technically, I suppose I'm an accomplice, but I could just bribe my way out of any trouble. You wouldn't, Hermione told him sternly. I know, Harry agreed. But I could. That doesn't matter anyway, Neville spoke up. Because before we left, Draco confessed to being the heir of Slytherin. But he's not, Harry protested. Hermione sighed indulgently. Look, Harry, I know he's your friend, but he's also Dash, a cold-blooded little sociopath, Ron suggested. Seriously overcompensating for something? Neville tried. The victim of a severe father complex agitated by the rumors about his parentage that have been circulating for the last year and a half. Harry offered. No. Hermione glared. I was going to say Dash. It doesn't really matter what you were going to say, Harry told her, deciding not to even bother. We've already had this conversation. Draco's not even a Parselmouth. He can't be Slytherin's heir. But he confessed. Ron whined. Looked like someone had told him Christmas was cancelled. And so was breakfast. He's also 12 and an idiot, Ron, Harry told him annoyed. Well, can't argue with you there. Ron mused. Can the fact that he's an idiot be his motivation for opening the chamber? No, it can't. I've already told you that Voldemort's the one who's opening the chamber, and he's using a supposedly dead Dash. And we've had this conversation before, too. Hermione cut him off. No one actually believes that, Luna does, Harry said defensively, and not a little irritated at being cut off. Well, Luna's... Hermione paused, searching for the right word. Luna? No, really, Hermione? Harry rolled his eyes. And there's no point arguing about this. Draco's too much of a child to realize that he shouldn't be going around claiming credit for something like this even if he were responsible, which he's not, by the way. You are too much children to realize what he's doing and why, and I can't make you understand that. Hermione bristled at being called a child and opened her mouth to fire off an angry retort. Harry didn't let her. As I mentioned earlier, Draco's confession falls under the category of hearsay, and he will most definitely deny it if Dumbledore asks him about it. Basically, all you can do is stalk him until you're satisfied he's innocent. As we've all realized that someone could order an attack in advance, having an alibi means nothing, so you're not going to let up until I catch him. Wait, you? Neville asked. Of course, Harry grinned good-naturedly. I've been told that I have a saving people thing. And Professor Lockhart's assured me that the dramatic killing of Basilisk would be a riveting bestseller. Chapter 22. After Ron, Hermione, and Neville had gone to bed, Harry stayed down in the common room, waiting for Sirius to call. Sure enough, after 20 minutes, his mirror flashed to indicate that Sirius was trying to reach him. He removed the silencing spell from the mirror and waited to see what his godfather had to say. "You sent me a bloody mirror?" was the first thing out of Sirius's mouth. "Well, hello to you too, Sirius. I haven't seen you since Halloween." "I'm fine. Thanks for asking. How have you been?" Harry asked politely. "Don't get cute with me, Harry," Sirius growled. "You sent me a mirror for Christmas." "Don't get pissy with me, Sirius," Harry said, imitating Sirius's indignant tone. "You really need it. When was the last time you shaved?" "I've been on the run." "I got you a wand," Harry pointed out. "You made me look like an 11-year-old girl first," Sirius shot back. Harry shrugged, trying valiantly to suppress his grin at that very interesting mental picture. "What can I say, Sirius? Sacrifices must be made." "I didn't see you making any sacrifices," Sirius said moodily. "Au contraire, I am now scarred for life," Harry insisted. "You don't look scarred," Sirius countered as Harry lost the fight to keep his face impassive. "Yeah, well..." Harry trailed off. "I thought I should probably warn you before I actually do it, but Mrs. Fig sent me one of her Kneasel kittens, and I'm having one of the school owls deliver it to Filch tomorrow at breakfast." Sirius froze, mouth agape in horror. "Harry, you..." He shook his head, unable to continue. Harry rolled his eyes. "Spare me the histrionics, please." "What histrionics?" "I am genuinely horrified and appalled here," Sirius huffed indignantly. "What were those muggles thinking when they raised you? I sure wish we had a less active child protection service, so we could beat the magic out of our freak of a nephew," Harry suggested impishly. "You know what I mean," Sirius said impatiently. Harry nodded. "Indeed I do. That's why I answered your question to the best of my abilities." "Don't play dumb, Harry. It doesn't suit you," Sirius sniped. "Hey, if you're going to be like that, then fine. Where's my Christmas present?" Harry demanded, crossing his arms. "You can't complain about what I got you and then turn around and not get me anything. I'm a fugitive of the law." "I don't exactly have the resources to get you anything," Sirius said defensively. "Bull," Harry said dismissively. "You have a wand, don't you? Anything I can make with a wand, you can make," Sirius pointed out. "Given my little prison stint, you technically have more years of using magic on you than I do." "Details, details." Harry waved his hand impatiently. "And what I meant was, you can use glamour, and don't even pretend that the goblins care that you're fugitive. You could have easily gotten me something. Well, maybe I would have been more receptive if you'd agreed to meet up." "I haven't seen you in months, after all," Sirius pouted. "That's because, your fugitive status notwithstanding, I'm off at boarding school. That's kind of how these things work. You're just going to have to get used to that." "I am used to it," Sirius muttered. "But you're the only other person who even understands what's going on with the future and about the Horcruxes, and who knows that I'm innocent. I have to use a bloody glamour any time I go anywhere." "Oh, so you can use a glamour to go places but not to buy me stuff?"
Typical.
"You are, without a doubt, the worst godfather ever," Harry declared dramatically. "Hey, I ate rats for you," Sirius counted. Harry made a face.
"Damn, you've got me there."
"But seriously, Sirius, and so help me, don't you dare make another stupid pun about that. What I said was completely unintentional. I wanted to meet up, but it just wouldn't be very feasible. We don't want there to be any chance of anyone seeing you. We couldn't even meet at the Shrieking Shack since you destroyed it," Harry told him. "That was an accident." Sirius protested. "But it's still gone. And very symbolic if you think about it. But anyway, you wouldn't even be on the run if you just agreed to dash." "We've been over this, Harry," Sirius interrupted. "It's just not happening. The only way I step foot in that godforsaken house again is if you drag my cold, dead corpse through the doorway." "Isn't it a bit redundant to say cold and dead?" Harry asked, seeing as how they mean the same thing. "I know that. I'm just being thorough," Sirius assured him. "And besides, anything I can buy for you dash, I know, Harry said tiredly. I can buy for myself. You're really not getting this whole spirit of Christmas thing, are you? You spend 12 years in bloody Azkaban, and we'll see just how much Christmas spirit you have, Sirius countered. You had plenty of Christmas spirit before you fell through the veil, Harry pointed out. You fall through the veil and dash, Sirius paused.
Oh.
Well, maybe I'm just depressed because Remus still thinks I'm evil. You have me, Harry told him. There was silence from Sirius's end. Sirius.
What?
Sirius asked innocently. Of course I have you. How about, to make it up to you, I teach you how to be an animagus? As the only child of the Marauders dash. Actually, Remus had a son, too, Harry interjected. His name is Teddy. Sirius looked a little put out.
Fine, he rallied.
Then, as the first child of the Marauders, it is truly pathetic that you managed to go this long without becoming one. That's a nice sentiment, Harry said pleasantly. But I had that mastered by the time I was 21. Really? Sirius asked, looking extremely excited.
What are you?
Harry smirked. Now, Sirius. That would be telling. Hey, Draco. Glad I caught you, Harry said, slapping the Slytherin in question on the back. Draco eyed him warily. Does this mean you're talking to me again? Again? I never stopped talking to you, Harry assured him. Are you sure? Because I seem to recall you admitting you were avoiding me sometime in November, Draco said casually. Really, Draco, you do say the strangest things, Harry said, shaking his head. Now why would I go and do a silly thing like that? Avoid me? Draco asked. Well, actually, I meant admit to avoiding you. But let's go with that. Why would I avoid you, Draco? Harry asked, the epitome of innocence. Because you were spreading rumors about my parentage? Draco suggested. There are rumors about your parentage? Harry asked, looking shocked. Oh, come off it, Draco said, irritated. I know you know. I know you started them. If you say so, Harry said, sounding dubious. What is it that you wanted? Draco asked testily. I wanted to remind your father that after someone searches your property, they cannot research it without a warrant, and they cannot get that without what I like to call due cause. I would like to further remind you that hearsay does not qualify, nor does drugging several students, impersonating them, and overhearing any statements you may have made about your drawing room. Draco just stared at him. What? Have a good day, Harry said cheerfully as he ran off, leaving Draco shaking his head in confusion and growing paranoia behind him. The next month and a half passed quite uneventfully. Only 3 people had been petrified: Zacharias Smith again, Randolph Burrow from Ravenclaw, and Cormac McLaggen, who Harry was even more tempted to leave petrified than he was Zacharias, and all had been quickly revived. Despite the fact that Sirius called him on the mirror at least twice every week, Harry still refused to tell him what animagus form he had. He didn't really have a reason for it, although it was fun watching Sirius jump through hoops trying to analyze him and figure out what animal he was, even though he thought it was painfully obvious. But then he'd had Hermione spend days analyzing why after he completed the transformation, so maybe that was why. Valentine's Day, he decided, would be, without a doubt, one of the worst days of his life, with Lockhart running the show and the looks some of the barely pubescent girls were giving him. It also made him feel something like a pervert because he was so much older than them, even though he didn't look it and wasn't actually doing anything to encourage their affections. Quite the contrary, he kept trying to reject them, but they kept misinterpreting that to mean he was playing hard to get. Needless to say, Luna and Hermione were the only girls he felt completely comfortable around in the days preceding the 14th. On Valentine's Day itself, Harry realized that he'd worked himself up into such a panic that he would probably snap and start hexing anyone coming within a 5-foot radius of him, and decided, for everyone's sake, to just stay in bed. It wasn't like he was going to miss anything with all of those dwarfs and hormones floating around. Harry was especially grateful that he chose to do this when the dwarves began a 15-hour siege on his fortunately fortified dormitory door starting at 9 that morning. After reinforcing the protections he'd cast and adding a couple of silencing spells, it really didn't bother him all day, although his roommates were a bit disturbed when they came back that evening. Apparently, it was weird that he had an entire army full of determined message deliverers. Determined, but clearly only within reason, as they stopped the minute it hit midnight. Apparently dwarves don't do overtime. In March, Harry and Luna attended the loud and raucous party the Mandrakes were throwing in Greenhouse 3, and it honestly had to be one of the most bizarre experiences Harry ever had. Particularly since he could barely hear anything due to the spells he and Luna had cast on themselves, so they wouldn't be knocked out or killed by their hosts. It certainly made for an interesting editorial, though, and some strange pictures. It struck Harry as slightly odd that the Mandrakes were almost fully matured, but nobody really seemed to care, as Harry kept the supply of Mandrake potion on coming whenever anybody needed it. Before Harry knew it, it was time to choose the classes for third year. And despite what Hermione may have thought, Harry did think long and hard about his choices. You want to take Muggle Studies, Care of Magical Creatures, and Divination? Hermione asked incredulously, glancing at his sheet. Yep, Harry nodded. I can't believe you, Hermione said, shaking her head in disbelief. Why not? Harry asked. You're taking them. He paused. Among other things. Hermione looked startled. How did you know about Dash? You totally planning on using the time turner. I got you to take not only those 3 subjects but arithmancy and ancient runes, too? Harry asked innocently. Now Hermione looked outraged. Harry, that was supposed to be a secret. And how did you even know about that in the first place? Harry crossed his arms and said, not a little smugly, that's what you get for doubting my scar. Hermione looked bemused. Are you saying your scar wants an apology or something? Harry cocked his head to the side, pretending to consult with said facial disfigurement. My scar says that would be nice. Hermione raised her eyes to the heavens in a why-me gesture. If I do, will you not tell anyone else? You know, you guys can stop acting like we're not here any time now, Neville told them. Yeah, and we are perfectly capable of keeping secrets, Ron added. Harry ignored them. I promise. Another pause. And so does my scar. Even if I believed your scar could talk, you're the only one who understands it. Hermione exploded. You don't know that, Harry told her crossly. Still here, Neville said. Who else can communicate with your scar then, and why haven't they come forward? Hermione challenged. Well, I'm sure I don't know the answer to either question. I'm not my scar's keeper after all. Harry glared at Hermione, who had snorted at that. But possibly it's because they don't want anyone to think they're crazy. Because why would anyone think that someone was crazy for hearing your scar talk to them? Hermione asked sarcastically. Hey, do you want to just forget them and play chess since they won't acknowledge us? Ron asked. Why not? Neville shrugged. See how they like it? My scar is still waiting for that apology, Harry reminded her. Fine. Hermione threw her hands up in the air. I'm sorry if I offended your scar by implying that it is not sentient and as such cannot actually speak to anyone. And for thinking that even if it could, it still wouldn't be psychic, because that is really pushing the limits of what I'm willing to believe, even in a magic school. My scar thanks you, and what's more, I thank you, Harry said gravely. My scar really wouldn't shut up about how angry and hurt it was whenever you were in the room. I do have a question for you, though. If you don't believe anyone can be psychic, what's the point of taking divination? I may not believe in it, but I don't know for sure that it's not real, and I'm anal enough that I can't stand the possibility of missing out on what might turn out to be a completely legitimate learning experience, Hermione answered promptly. Harry laughed at that. Hermione, regardless of your opinions of the validity of the art of divination as a whole, even the most blatant frauds will tell you that you can't learn divination. You either have the inner eye or you don't. Are you saying I don't have this inner eye? Hermione asked, her voice dangerous. Clearly she didn't appreciate being told she wasn't good enough to take a class, even one she didn't particularly want to take, but was taking more as a matter of principle. I'm just saying that if you did, you probably would have had some indication by now, Harry said delicately. Like with you and your scar? Hermione sniffed. By that do you mean, do I think I'll be good at the subject? Harry asked. I think I'll be phenomenal, partly because of his incredibly BS abilities. But something you should know is that a common characteristic of seers is that the stronger inner eye you possess, the more, well, strange you tend to be. So you would be an expert, Hermione said innocently. And probably Luna too. But does that mean that our professor would also be a bit distant? Professor Trelawney has a very strong inner eye, but she sometimes tries to push it, force future knowledge that she needs to just let come naturally. I have no doubt that she'd have a lot more visions if she'd just let it come naturally, Harry confided. How would you come to that conclusion, if she never has? Hermione was intrigued. Because real seers never remember their prophecies, Harry explained. Some higher power or whatever is speaking through them. Then how do you explain that you remember everything you see? Hermione countered.
Easy.
I'm not psychic, my scar is, Harry said simply. Then how would you be good at divination? Hermione asked. I have 24-hour access to my scar, first of all. Secondly, when it comes to divination class, a lot of the time you have to fake it, no matter how talented you are. Then why take the class if you seem to be convinced it won't do any good? Hermione asked, baffled. Because it's an easy duh, Ron supplied, looking up from the chessboard. Because I'd like an opportunity to further hone my BS abilities and it won't be that difficult, Harry said. Am I right, Ron? Ron, who had just said something to that effect literally 10 seconds before Harry remembered he existed, just gaped at him in horror. Neville patted him on the arm sympathetically. Fine, don't answer me, Harry said, annoyed. I don't care. Why would you want to do that when you can take something useful like arithmancy or ancient runes? Hermione demanded. Because I know nothing about either of those subjects and I would actually have to work at it and quite frankly I just don't feel like it, Harry replied. I can understand taking care of magical creatures. That might not come into play with whatever you want to do once you graduate, but surely you will, at some point, encounter some magical creatures, and it would help if you knew the basics when dealing with them. On the other hand, Muggle studies? Hermione couldn't believe it. Why not? Harry said again. You're taking it. I'm only taking it because I think it would be fascinating to study Muggles from a wizarding perspective, Hermione pointed out. Since you won't even try something new, I think I can safely say that that's not your motivation. So, why are you really taking it? Even easier, Hermione threw a book at him.
What?
You're impossible, you know that? Hermione grumbled. But you love me anyway, Harry grinned. Only because you lured me into friendship under false pretenses. Hermione insisted. Harry's eyebrows wrinkled in confusion. It wasn't often he was confused since his return to the past, and he didn't like the feeling. False pretenses? You didn't tell me you were crazy. That's because I'm not, Harry protested. Your scar says otherwise, Hermione responded. Oh, so now you can hear my scar. By your own logic, that makes you crazy, Harry shot back. I think they're both crazy, Ron offered. For once, I agree, Neville said. Why are they ignoring us again? Ron asked, still a little offended. I don't think they're doing it on purpose. I just think that they're both the type of people who get so caught up in arguments they just don't notice anything outside of what they're saying, Neville suggested. Really? That's so weird. Neville shrugged. You and Hermione are the same way, you know? Ron's eyes bulged out. Really? Neville nodded, thinking back on all the times Harry had been off doing God knows what, and he had been left alone with a bickering Ron and Hermione and thoroughly ignored. Was it any wonder, really, he reached out to Ginny? Growing up with 6 older brothers, she understood perfectly. Chapter 23. Harry, Ron, Neville, and Hermione traipsed down to see Hagrid after Harry and team. But mostly Harry had flattened Hufflepuff 400 to 230. It had been a long game, but then that was what Harry got for having the worst broom in the game when everyone else was on equal footing. Still, the look on Cedric's face when Harry swooped in and grabbed the snitch from right behind Cedric's ear, where it had been for at least 5 minutes that Harry was aware of, it was like the snitch was stalking the older boy or something. Hi, Hagrid, Harry greeted. Did you see the game? Or, more specifically, did you see the way I totally trounced Cedric despite the fact that my broom really doesn't hold a candle to his? Oh, of course, Hagrid assured him. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Oh, please, Hermione said, annoyance clear on her face. He has a Nimbus 2001. You have a Nimbus 2000. The two brooms came out within a year of each other. How much of a difference can there possibly be? The other four did not dignify that question with a response. Men, Hermione huffed. Right, because that's not sexist at all, Hermione, Neville said, rolling his eyes. What's the real reason you didn't get a Nimbus 2001, Harry? Ron took the opportunity to ask. I'm holding out to make my godfather buy me a firebolt next year, Harry confided. Ron's brow wrinkled in confusion. But isn't your godfather Dash? Yes, Harry said shortly. Which is why he totally owes me years' worth of Christmas presents. Honestly, he didn't even get me anything this year. But he's a mass murderer. And on the run, Ron pointed out. What's this? Hermione looked startled. How do you know Abu Black? Hagrid demanded. Oh look, Fudge, Harry said, for once glad to see the man. He was so not looking forward to having this conversation a full year early. Or at all for that matter. Where? Ron asked eagerly. Harry wondered briefly why in the world he was so excited to see the rather incompetent and extremely pompous Minister of Magic, and then he realized that Ron had completely misunderstood what he said because he was, as per usual, thinking with his stomach. Trust me, you probably don't want any if Hagrid made it, Neville whispered to him, too low for Hagrid to hear. Did you mean food, Harry? No, I meant the Minister of Magic, Harry explained. Hermione sighed, obviously not believing him, but deciding to humor him anyway. Why would the Minister of Magic be outside of Hagrid's hut? She asked patiently. Harry narrowed his eyes. I don't know. It better not be what I think it is.
Though?
Do you think they found out about the attacks? Hagrid asked nervously. There's no proof, Harry was quick to reassure him. Even if they did hear something, with our unpetrifaction rate, there's nothing to see, and thus nothing they can do. But why would they come after Hagrid? Hermione was puzzled, but thinking hard. Because they're all a bunch of morons, Harry said simply. What do you expect? Hagrid shot Harry a grateful look as there was a loud knock on the door. You four, hide, Hagrid advised. Everyone looked at Harry. What makes you think I even have my invisibility cloak? He asked. You always have your invisibility cloak, Neville replied calmly. So what if I do? Harry asked, crossing his arms defiantly. It's not curfew for a good 20 minutes or so. We have every right to be here. Hagrid looked unsure for a moment before shrugging and said, Suit yourself. Good evening, Hagrid. Professor Dumbledore greeted him once the door was finally opened. And guests? He didn't really sound all that surprised to find Harry and his posse there. Bad business, Hagrid, Fudge said curtly. Very bad business. If it's true, well, we just can't take that risk. You wonder what are you doing here? He asked once he spotted the students. We're visiting our dear friend Hagrid and having a nice conversation about how great it is that there isn't a basilisk loose at school this year because, quite frankly, that would suck. Harry lied, smiling brightly. There isn't. Fudge looked confused. He turned to the man standing behind him. But you said Dash. Of course there's a basilisk loose in the school, Lucius Malfoy interjected smoothly. Draco wouldn't lie about a thing like that. Now, I don't know who you think you are, but I assure you that, Potter. The last part was said very flat and emotionless. Honestly, it was almost like Lucius had finally figured out the scandal Harry had caused for his family. Still, the fact that Lucius hadn't so much as twitched for his wand made him somewhat doubt that. Potter. Fudge peered closely at Harry. As in Harry Potter? I could have sworn you were DRA, Dash, he trailed off as he glanced at his #1 campaign contributor. Never mind. Why does everyone keep doing that? Lucius asked idly. Did you guys have a point in being here? Harry asked, not so much because he wanted to know or get the conversation moving, but because he fully appreciated how easily people could get sidetracked and knew no one else would be rude enough to bring them back to the matter at hand. Lucius threw him an annoyed glance, because Fudge was far too inclined to kiss his ass to do so himself. Of course there is. We're here to stop the attacks. What attacks? I haven't heard anything about any attacks. Did you guys hear anything? Harry turned to his friends. Nope, Ron said immediately. Not a thing, Neville concurred. Was anyone hurt? Hermione asked, rather than outright lying to an authority figure. Fudge looked a little embarrassed. Well, no. But basilisks are serious business. So they are, Harry agreed, looking appropriately puzzled. What attacks are you talking about, sir? God, calling Fudge, sir, was bloody nauseating. There is a basilisk running loose in this school, and you all are covering it up, Lucius accused, sounding impatient. Why on earth would we do that, Lucius? Dumbledore spoke up. As Cornelius said, basilisks are very dangerous, and if something was going around killing or, at the very least, petrifying students, how could we possibly hide that? We're not monitoring communications, and you can ask some of the students if you require further reassurance. As much faith as we have in you, Dumbledore, Lucius said, looking for all the world as if those words pained him to say. My son, who has my complete confidence, has insisted that dash. I'm sure he has, Harry interrupted. But if that were true, then why hasn't anybody else said anything? Or do you honestly think that people are more afraid of getting in trouble for telling than of a giant bloody snake? Are you calling my son a liar? Lucius demanded. Of course not, Harry replied, shocked. He never was one to be the pot calling the kettle black, after all. In fact, Draco's a friend of mine. I'm the one who gave him that advice about illegal search and seizure, you know. But I would also like to point out that Draco is also claiming to be the heir of Slytherin, so perhaps that's why he's talking about a basilisk. My son wouldn't dash, Lucius began angrily. Mr. Malfoy? Ron waited until Lucius looked over at him. Your son is 12. Lucius flushed angrily, and Ron looked quite pleased of himself. Regardless of the validity of these claims, Fudge, who was looking disappointed at the turn of events that didn't appear to be leading to him getting to arrest Hagrid and making Lucius happy, began. The fact remains that claims have been made, and from a reliable source from a good family. Therefore, investigations must be made. By all means, Dumbledore said magnanimously. Would you care to accompany us, Hagrid? I think it's time the 4 of you got back to your common room anyway. The 8 of them made their way back to the castle in a variety of spirits. Hagrid was jumpy, as if Fudge might arrest him at any moment. Hermione was in awe of meeting the most powerful, at least nominally, wizard in Britain. Ron was still pleased he had gotten the best of the father of his mortal enemy. Lucius was glowering at everyone but Neville and Hermione. Neville because he was from a nice, respectable pureblood family, and Hermione because he honestly had no idea who she was or why he should hate her. Fudge was looking unsettled as he was beginning to realize that he was caught in the middle of a power struggle between 2 of the wizards he depended upon the most. Neville looked like he'd rather be doing something less dramatic, and Harry was staring up at the stars and trying to do some last-minute studying for that astronomy test he was going to have at midnight. Of course, almost the second they stepped foot into the castle, Miss Amaretto, Filch's reasoning behind naming his new cat after an Italian liquor was beyond Harry's comprehension, spotted them and, sure enough, Filch quickly accosted them. There you are, he growled at Harry. Everyone's been looking for you. There's been another one. Another what, exactly? Lucius asked, looking disdainfully at the squib caretaker. Clearly remembering and disliking Lucius from his own days as a student, Filch took a moment before answering. Another pair of students hexing each other in the hallway. Said they were after a rogue pixie. Hogwarts being what it was, no one bothered to question what a rogue pixie would be doing there or why students felt the need to curse it. Filch turned to Harry. They're asking for you? Harry nodded solemnly.
Right.
I have to go help them spin this, so they don't look like morons at breakfast tomorrow when the whole school's heard about it. With that, he took off, running down the hallway. Wipe your feet, Filch called after him. Be careful running in the hallways, Dumbledore added mildly. Wait, we should probably go to the hospital wing, too, Fudge suggested as Harry exited hearing range. Quickly arriving at the hospital wing, Harry automatically pulled out 2 polyjuice potions and thrust them into Madame Pomfrey's outstretched hand. Madame Pomfrey stared at them inquisitively. Is this polyjuice potion? Air, maybe, he replied. He caught his breath. Here, he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out 2 vials of Mandrake Draught, Apparently, it was Mandrake Draft and not Mandrake Potion. Who knew? Well, other than Neville and Hermione, who had given him a 15-minute lecture on the subject, this time. Why were you even carrying Polyjuice Potion around with you anyway? Madame Pomfrey asked suspiciously. And, is it even legal here at Hogwarts? I'm pretty sure that nobody bothered to ban it due to its expense, difficulty in making, and overall rarity. But never mind that. Who got petrified this time? He asked, deliberately changing the subject. Draco Malfoy and Cedric Diggory, came the terse response. Harry laughed. Now that is too funny. Madame Pomfrey raised an eyebrow at him. How is that funny? I thought both of these boys were friends of yours. Oh, they are, Harry agreed. That's not what's funny. What's funny is, well, first off, what were they even doing together in the first place? I wasn't even aware that they knew each other. I'm sure I don't know, answered the nurse dryly. They were POAs? Harry repeated. The only thing he could think of that those 3 letters could mean was prisoner of Azkaban, but he somehow doubted that was the case here. Petrified on arrival, she explained with a slight smile. I see. And what I was saying was that Draco's father and Minister Fudge are here in the castle this very moment looking for evidence to back up Draco's claims that people are getting petrified left and right, and Draco chooses now to go and get himself petrified. Because I'm sure that's exactly what he was planning when he got attacked, Madame Pomfrey said sarcastically. Harry shrugged. Hey, you never know. Fortunately, the Mandrake Draft is going to take effect any second now, right? He asked as he heard footsteps outside the door. Madame Pomfrey glanced worriedly at her patients. It should. Just as the door to the hospital wing swung open, Draco and Cedric were blinking sleepily. Dad? Draco asked confused. He quickly realized that there were other people in the room. At some point, however, Harry's friends had clearly been sent back to the common room. I mean, Father? What are you doing here? I think the more appropriate question is, what are you doing here? Lucius asked, a little concern inadvertently slipping into his voice. I was... Draco paused, trying to remember. Pixie. Harry coughed. Cedric, thankfully, got Harry's meaning instantly. We were comparing seeker strategies in the hallway when all of a sudden this little blue pixie comes out of nowhere and starts attacking us. Neither of us could think of a pixie banishing charm off the top of our heads, so we tried to freeze it, but it kept moving, so we missed and hit each other, he told them, sounding very responsible and convincing. No wonder he was a prefect. Was he head boy as well? Harry couldn't remember. Is that true, Draco? Lucius turned a critical eye to his son. Still looking a bit out of it, Draco looked from his father to Harry indecisively. Yes, he finally said. Are these 2 your only patients, Madame Pomfrey? Dumbledore asked, polite as ever. Aside from a 4th year, who managed to turn her ears into carrots, yes, they are, the nurse confirmed. You don't mind if we make sure of that, do you? Fudge asked, walking further into the room. He soon found his path blocked by an irate school nurse, however. Minister, I hope you're not suggesting that you think I am hiding patients, she began heatedly, advancing on him menacingly. No, Fudge tried to defend himself, but she was having none of it. Of course, if I was going to hide them, it certainly wouldn't be in the hospital wing, now would it? Why don't you go check for them in a broom closet? Or on the roof, she suggested icily. I believe you, Fudge insisted, quickly retreating.
Thank you, she said.
Now, if you don't mind, you're disturbing my patients. With that, they had no choice but to leave. Faced with absolutely no evidence of petrifaction or really anything out of the ordinary going on save, perhaps, the freakishly empty hospital wing, Fudge and Lucius were forced to leave as well, extremely embarrassed for making so much commotion over something that everyone else was pretending wasn't happening. Harry idly wondered what would happen when the truth came out, and it would come out as per his deal with Lockhart, but realized that as a 2nd year, it really didn't matter to him one way or the other what happened or how it looked for the school because he was technically too young to be expected to deal with that. As a 2nd year, it was fully understandable why he started screaming the minute Hagrid slipped them that cryptic, follow the spider's advice that would never, ever lead to anything good. It was actually a good thing that Lucius and Fudge had already left. After all, It wouldn't do to get people questioning his sanity any sooner than they had to. Dear Merlin, this basilisk is a menace. Draco was heard complaining during their next potions class. Does that mean that you've renounced your evil ways as heir of Slytherin? Harry asked innocently. Draco shot him a withering look. That isn't funny, Potter. Oh, I know it isn't, Harry said, trying to placate him as Draco only ever called him Potter when he was really annoyed. It's just that half the class genuinely believes you to be the heir of Slytherin and therefore really want an answer to that question. Draco stared at Harry. You're serious? No, I'm Harry, Harry said before he could stop himself. Draco looked at him quizzically. What dash? Never mind, moral obligation, you wouldn't understand, Harry said dismissively. So, once and for all, since you totally got petrified, are you, or are you not the heir of Slytherin? Having been subject to Harry's no you are or no you aren't line of questioning that he got from the movie Clue, Draco wisely chose to reply in a fuller manner. I am not the heir of Slytherin. If Harry can still be the heir even when he has an alibi, then surely Malfoy can have the basilisk attack himself, Ron objected. Ron, shut up. Hermione elbowed Ron hard. She obviously understood how pointing out that Harry could still technically be the heir was not, under any circumstances, a good plan. What do we have here? Snape asked silkily, coming up behind them. They're arguing about whether or not Malfoy's being petrified rules him out as heir of Slytherin, and if Harry having an alibi could still make him a candidate after all, Neville supplied helpfully. I see. Snape's lip curled mockingly. And after the Minister of Magic himself came down to investigate those nasty rumors about a basilisk loose in the school and was assured that they were, in fact, nothing more than nasty rumors. Well, we both know that neither one of us is the heir, so our argument is really more for the sake of the rumor mill anyway, Harry offered. Why aren't you working, Potters? Snape demanded. Because I can't multitask to save my life when it comes to potions. I swear I look up for a second and something explodes. Harry paused and tilted his head. Of course, that could be because the Slytherins keep throwing things in my cauldron to test if I'm worthy of associating with them by surviving their periodic murder attempts. Seems kinda strange to me, but then what do I know? I'm not a Slytherin, but you could have been, Snape muttered absently as he moved down the line to check someone else's cauldron. Oh, you could have been. Chapter 24. A week before finals, Pettigrew was still on the loose, annoying everyone greatly by having petrified everyone at least once, except Harry, who he seemed to be avoiding, and occasionally leaving graffiti messages around the school, warning people about the heir. These messages only served to irritate Filch, however, which in turn served to irritate everyone else because, really, who likes a cantankerous caretaker on the warpath? And Filch certainly seemed to take every painted message as a personal affront. Harry was just on his way back from another grueling session of refusing to study for finals like everyone else, and was feeling quite pleased that he'd managed to run away from the library the minute Hermione's back was turned. He glanced at the wall idly as he noticed there was a new message and then froze. Their skeletons will lie in the chamber forever. There? As in, more than one person he'd have to go rescue now. Harry groaned. He hated multi-people rescues. After all, the more people the more complaints he got for not doing it heroically enough, and the more suspicions about how he somehow knew exactly what to do. Fortunately, he appeared to be the first one to have seen this new threat, or one of the first, anyway, as a lockdown hadn't been initiated yet. That gave him a little time. He headed immediately to Lockhart's office. Professor, do you still have that rooster I stoer borrowed from Hagrid's? Harry demanded, barging right in and hoping Lockhart didn't have company. Fortunately, Lockhart was alone. Of course I do. You said it would allow us to slay the basilisk without actually risking our lives. Without unduly risking our lives, Harry corrected. We're still dealing with a basilisk here, and that is always very dangerous. On the other hand, we've lasted 7 months with it running around and petrifying people every time we turn around, so we should be fine. Lockhart nodded. I've been petrified 4 times already. What's one more? Exactly, Harry agreed. Now, apparently at least 2 people have been taken down to the chamber, possibly more. This means that that stupid diary will also be down there, and the students were taken hostage to lure me down there. I seem to have a reputation as a saving people person, he explained. You don't say, Lockhart said dryly. Now, no matter what happens down there, I need you to stick to the plan. Things are probably going to get a little weird, and chances are the perpetrator is really crazy. Just act like you know what you're doing, let me taunt them a little, and then the minute it looks like the basilisk is going to make an appearance, get the rooster to crow. I can take care of everything else, Harry said, pulling out his invisibility cloak. This looks valuable, Lockhart said, fingering the material longingly. It is, Harry said grimly. It's also an heirloom, so don't even think about it. Besides, I have 24 people who can vouch that I do, in fact, own this, and I'm not telling you who, so you wouldn't be able to get them all. Now, get under it, so we can go. Fine. Lockhart sighed, looking disappointed, but doing as Harry asked. They silently proceeded to Myrtle's bathroom and pointedly ignored Dumbledore's announcement that everyone was to return to their common rooms. Once they had arrived, Harry went straight to the sinks to search for the serpent scratched on the surface of one of them while Lockhart talking Myrtle into letting him autograph her stall. Harry was really starting to wonder if it was actually possible for his vain professor to go longer than 20 minutes without feeling the need to sign something. Hey, I found it, Harry called out. Open. Lockhart came over and peered into the darkness uncertainly. Please tell me you can make stairs appear? How could I possibly make stairs appear? Harry asked logically. I don't have a bloody manual, you know. Besides, if there were stairs to be had, why in the world wouldn't they be here already? The fact you need to speak Parseltongue to get this far should mean that Slytherin wouldn't bother to make the stairs only appear if you ask for them. He's supposed to be more sensible than Gryffindor, after all. If you say so, but really, what's down there? We have no way of knowing how far down it is, and it's probably filthy. Lockhart wrinkled his nose at the thought. Harry sighed. Seriously, they had bigger problems than sanitation right now. Like the 2 possibly more hostages down in the chamber with Pettigrew and Voldemort's Horcrux. Tell you what, he said finally. You jump down and I'll cast a cushioning charm to soften the fall. That won't help with whatever dirt or grime that has got to be down there after 1,000 years or so, Lockhart pointed out. Well, that's the best you're going to get, so I suggest you take it, Harry growled. God, this was taking longer than just threatening him, as he and Ron had done last time. But I have to look my best for when we're done with this and return triumphantly to Dumbledore and the media, Lockhart protested. The grime will add authenticity, Harry shot back. But dash. Just go, Harry said, shoving him down into the darkness and casting a quick cushioning charm, like he promised. That does remind me, though. He took out his mirror.
Oi, Sirius.
What? Sirius asked. Harry could barely hear him as the sound of laughter and music was loud in the background. Where are you? Harry asked, listening to the voices going on around his errant godfather. I don't recognize the accents. That's because I'm in Vegas, Sirius explained as if it were obvious. Vegas? You're in America? Harry sputtered. What are you doing there? Gambling, Sirius said patiently. Well, but you're really too young for that. I'm 24, Harry said irritably, crossing his arms. Exactly, far too young, Sirius agreed. I, however, am 37, since we seem to be counting both timelines, and that's plenty old enough. Sirius, you know what? Never mind, Harry said, shaking his head. Listen, I need you to send a message to the Daily Prophet that 2 students were taken to the Chamber of Secrets. Sirius blinked. Any particular reason? You mean other than the fact that at least 2 students were taken to the Chamber of Secrets? Harry asked innocently. Frankly, yes. You've been working all year to keep this quiet, remember? Why do you want to blow all that now? Because everything is coming to a head, and I want proof when I capture Pettigrew, Harry told him. You think you'll manage that? Sirius asked, trying not to sound too hopeful. I'd better, Harry said fiercely. But listen, I've got to go. I left Lockhart alone down there, and if I don't hurry up he'll probably wander off, somehow manage to annoy Voldemort's Horcrux, and get himself killed. Just so we're clear, that would be a bad thing? Sirius asked innocently. Of course it would be. A death on my watch would be a huge blow for my reputation as resident hero, Harry exclaimed.
Bye.
Harry turned around to see Myrtle staring at him.
What?
You have issues, she told him seriously. Harry rolled his eyes as he took out his Nimbus 2000 and unshrunk it. Maybe it wasn't technically fair that he made Lockhart jump down when he had a broom the whole time, but really, Lockhart really should have been more prepared. Not to mention that Harry wasn't sure that Lockhart even could fly. After all, if he could, then he probably would carry a broom around with him at all times just so he could escape any situation if need be. Seeing as how he was a dreadful coward. When Harry landed beside Lockhart, the professor was dusting his robes off and trying vainly to look presentable. You had a broom the whole time? At Harry's nod, he shot Harry a murderous look and started off down the tunnel. Sorry, Harry offered half-heartedly as he ran to catch up with him. Lumos. When they finally reached the main chamber, a very different sight greeted them than last time. Instead of Ginny lying on the floor by the statue of Slytherin, Pettigrew lay prone. Do you think there's any point in stunning him? Harry wondered aloud. I really don't think you need to bother, Lockhart said, peering over at Pettigrew. He doesn't look like he's going to be going anywhere anytime soon. Yeah, I guess so, Harry agreed reluctantly. On the other hand, he is insanely good at evading capture. Wow, he can elude a preteen. He must be a criminal mastermind, Lockhart muttered, still obviously sore about Harry letting him get dirty when he technically didn't need to. You know, I only had the one broom, Harry said defensively. And it's not like I even knew that today would be the day until I saw the writing on the wall. Lockhart studiously pretended not to hear him, deciding instead to risk entering the room further. Harry's head shot in the direction of the voice. Ginny? What are you doing here? Oh, hi Luna. Somehow it was less jarring to see Luna in the chamber than Ginny, although Harry wasn't sure if that was because of Luna's penchant for getting into strange situations or because the odds of Ginny getting taken down to the chamber again was astronomically small. We were just on our way back from visiting the Thestrals when a short, bald man ambushed us, muttering something about how he's getting too old for this and felt vaguely like a pervert for kidnapping two young girls, and then I think he stunned us because we just woke up a couple of minutes ago, Luna explained. For the record, I am never going to go visit the Thestrals with you ever again, Ginny said decisively. That's hardly fair, Luna objected. He seemed to be waiting for you, and took me just because I was there. If anything, I should be the one who doesn't want to spend time with you anymore. It's not because of the kidnapping, Luna, Ginny sighed. It's just that I can't actually see your creepy zombie horses, and so going there and watching you pet them and feed them raw steak and seeing it get ripped apart by creatures I can't see is just kind of weird and not really my thing.
Oh.
Luna paused for a second. You could always watch somebody die, she suggested. Luna. Ginny exclaimed, scandalized. I can't do that. Why not? Luna asked reasonably. Just go to St. Mungo's and ask them for help. People are always dying there. That's not a very good recommendation for a magical hospital, Harry interjected. Luna just shrugged. The more you know about magic, the less you tend to know about medicine, so it's great for injuries, but if you ever have any illnesses, particularly muggle ones, you're out of luck. But of course, the more you know about magic, the less you tend to respect muggle treatments. That is really depressing, Harry said flatly. Another shrug. It's the atmosphere. He won't wake, said a soft voice. Harry looked over to see Lockhart nudging Pettigrew gingerly with his foot. I don't really care if he wakes up. I just need him alive, Harry replied. Come to think of it, I don't even need him alive, do I? I just need him nice and unexploded. I'm fairly sure he's still alive, Lockhart called out helpfully. Yes, he is, Tom Riddle agreed. For now. Why in the world are you killing the one guy stupid enough to follow you even when you're nothing but a disembodied spirit? And you're not even that, are you? You're just a diary filled with plenty of teenage angst. Riddle glared at Harry but didn't respond, instead twirling Lockhart's wand between his fingers. Why in the world had Lockhart set that down? This was going to make it harder. Although, on the bright side, it wasn't a compatible wand, so Riddle wouldn't be able to use it as effectively as he'd used Harry's. I do hope you plan on taking me seriously, Harry Potter, Riddle said. Wormtail told me you don't do that often, but I've waited a long time for this, for the chance to see you, speak to you. If you want to know how I survived the killing curse, the answer is none of your business, Harry replied politely. I don't think you quite understand, Riddle said slowly. I am going to kill you. That is inevitable and nothing you can do will change that. Wormtail will also die. I need his life force to bring myself into reality. Those two young girls, however, don't have to die. I will kill them, though, and slowly, if you do not give me the information I need. If you're planning on killing me anyway, then what's it matter how I survived the killing curse? Just use a different spell, Harry suggested, eyeing the wand in Riddle's hand warily and wondering if perhaps it wasn't the best idea to goad Voldemort's young self to kill him. Do you have any idea how boring it was, having to listen to the silly little troubles of such a silly little man? He'd been writing in the diary for months, telling me all his pitiful worries and woes, how Sirius Black escaped from Azkaban and was going to kill him, how he might convince Remus Lupin of the truth about what happened to the Potters, how he couldn't even reveal himself to be alive without proving a traitor, how every one of my followers would see him dead leading to my downfall, how no matter what he tried, he just couldn't get that basilisk to kill someone. Well, I'm sorry you were bored, Harry deadpanned. Though, seriously, if that's the worst inconvenience you had, you're pretty lucky. Last year, you had to put up with stuttering. All year. I swear, it was giving me migraines and I only ever saw Quirrell during class. He paused. The headaches might have actually had something to do with the face you were on the back of his head, but let's not quibble. Why won't you take me seriously? Riddle demanded, wand arm twitching. Because you're a bastion of teenage angst, Harry said simply. I already said that. On the other hand, a basilisk, now that's serious. I might even go so far as to say it is frightening. Of course, if you're not going to summon it and just want to have a nice chat, then I can work with that too. It will involve a lot more sarcasm and questioning just how badass a person is if they write in a diary. I become the most feared wizard of all time, Riddle retorted. And I'm a bloody mass murderer. I'll give you the mass murder thing, Harry said. But the whole effect is ruined by the fact that you keep a diary. I mean, honestly, what's with that? It's like, Dear Diary, today I went and slaughtered an entire village of muggles. Aren't I diabolical? And no, I am in no way compensating for the fact that my father abandoned my mother before I was born. And no, said father was not a muggle. Where are these dreadful accusations coming from? They are distinctly not fabulous. Stop that, Riddle ordered, his face red with fury. And as for the whole most feared wizard of all time thing, there's just no way. I mean, seriously. You may terrify everyone now, but that's just a generational thing. Before you, everyone was scared of Grindelwald, and God knows there were countless before him. And everyone knows Dumbledore is more well-respected than you anyway. I was going to let your little girlfriends live, Potter, but you've pushed me too far. Speak to me, Slytherin, greatest of the Hogwarts Four, Riddle hissed. Wow. He had a huge ego. I wonder if he had to say that when he was visiting the chamber, Harry mused. Is it time yet? Lockhart whispered, coming to stand beside Harry. Almost, Harry said quietly. Close your eyes, and I'll tell you when. Hey, Luna, Ginny, you guys better close your eyes, too. Even if you only get petrified, now's really not the best time for that. Harry waited until he heard Riddle hiss, Kill them. Kill them all. Now, he breathed. A few moments later, he heard unmistakable sound of a rooster crowing and a loud thump as something heavy hit the floor. Harry chanced to look through his mirror and saw that the basilisk was dead. Fortunately, its eyes were also closed, so Harry wasn't even petrified. Did basilisks' eyes kill or petrify when they were dead? Harry was glad he didn't have to find out. And come to think of it, why in the world was meeting a basilisk's gaze such a dangerous thing to do in the first place? He'd have to remember to ask Hermione. Or if she didn't know Dumbledore. Or maybe Hagrid. Surely someone, somewhere, would have an answer for him. No, Riddle cried, interrupting his musing, and for some reason, still speaking in Parseltongue. You will pay for this, you dash. Oh, give it up, already, Harry said, annoyed. He turned to Lockhart. Did you grab the diary? Lockhart nodded. Of course, he said, handing it over. Excellent. Harry beamed, putting on some dragonhide gloves and feeling quite fortunate he had had potions earlier that day. Accio Basilisk Fong. What are you doing? Riddle demanded, abruptly switching over to English. I'm destroying your diary, Harry told him bluntly as he caught the Fong. But you can't. Riddle protested desperately, moving towards them. You're too old for these things, and given your status as self-proclaimed scariest wizard ever, it's quite frankly embarrassing that you still have this. It's for your own good, really, Harry said mockingly as he drove the Fong through the diary. Chapter 25. Are you guys okay? Harry asked, turning to face his three companions. I believe so, Luna answered him, eyeing Ginny and Lockhart carefully. But Norbert isn't. She bent down to pick up the crumple-horn snorkack creature Harry had gotten her for Christmas and showed the stiff little pig-like creature to him. Is it okay? Harry asked, concerned. He didn't even want to think about how difficult replacing Norbert might be. Luna poked it experimentally. I think it's just petrified. Do you have any mandrake draft with you? How did it get petrified? Harry asked, reaching into his cloak and pull out a vial to hand to Luna. I would guess that it looked into the mirror Ginny put on the floor, Luna said. Why in the world did you put a mirror on the floor? Harry questioned. Ginny flushed. Oh, well, I was worried I might be tempted to watch the heroic fight, and I didn't want to get myself killed, so I put my mirror down so, if I accidentally saw the basilisk's eyes, I'd be fine. You know, it's a sad day when getting petrified is widely regarded to be fine, Harry mused. Speaking of, Norbert was fine, and now he's even better, Luna exclaimed brightly, watching Norbert wake up. I've got to tell you, Luna, I was pretty surprised when you continued to print things about crumple-horned snorkacks in the Quibbler now that everyone knows that they exist, Harry said conversationally, waiting for the draft to take effect. Well, Daddy and I had a long conversation about that, and we eventually came to the conclusion that even though we no longer need to fight for the crumple-horned snorkacks, right, for people to know it exists, it is still a very recently discovered species that little is known about, so there's still a story there. Besides, Norbert's adorable, and so we've made him our official mascot. A regular Quibbler success story about the power of the press overcoming widespread ignorance, if you will, Luna explained proudly. Good for you, Luna, Harry said, genuinely happy for her. Of course, Ginny continued, completely ignoring the discussion about Norbert. That was before I knew that the heroic fight would basically just consist of you guys cheating and using a rooster. Hey, Lockhart began heatedly. To the best of my knowledge, there aren't any rules for killing basilisks. And even if there were, you should just be grateful that we saved you and not disappointed that we didn't fulfill your preteen fantasies of heroic behavior. Ginny rolled her eyes. Of course Harry saved us. Harry always saves everyone. Lockhart looked over at Harry approvingly. That whole being personally called upon every time anyone was petrified all year thing really worked out well for you, didn't it? When that guy kidnapped us, I thought, well, this sucks, but at least now I'll have a great story to tell people after Harry rescues me, but no. My story will have to be, Harry heroically let the basilisk get within 200 feet of him and then sicked a rooster on it, killing it instantly. Ginny huffed, clearly very put out that nothing good was coming out of her kidnapping. Harry and Lockhart exchanged glances. You do know that that's not what we're going to tell people, right? Harry asked hesitantly. Ginny blinked at him. But that's what happened, she said, as if that had anything to do with it. For now, Lockhart agreed. But really, stories like that just don't sell books. We'll need to come up with something else. You're going to be writing a book on this? Ginny asked, disbelief evident in her voice. But nothing happened. On the contrary, we killed a basilisk, Harry corrected. We just didn't do it in a very exciting way. You know what would be exciting, though? Professor Lockhart managing to gouge out the basilisk's eyes before it bit him in the shoulder, and I took advantage of the distraction to heroically slay the basilisk with the sword of Gryffindor. But that's not what happened. Ginny really seemed stuck on this one point. But there's really no proof one way or another, Lockhart pointed out. We'll have to stab the eyes of the basilisk so that it lines up with Harry's version, but that would only marginally diminish the value and it would make handling it safer anyway. So, I think we should stick with Harry's version, as it portrays us both in a good light. Granted, I would rather be the one slaying the basilisk, but letting a minor and a student of mine get bitten by a basilisk and serve as a distraction would be highly irresponsible and hurt my reputation accordingly. If either one of you got bitten by the basilisk, then why are you still alive? They are highly poisonous after all. And there's no mark whatsoever, Ginny pointed out. Harry rolled his eyes. Obviously, we healed him with the vial of phoenix tears I've always kept with me ever since learning of the basilisk's existence. He paused, considering. She does have a point about that lack of a mark, though. Defindo. Hey, Lockhart protested, as his left sleeve fell off. These are good robes. They've also been exposed to all of the grime from a millennia of no one cleaning anything down here, remember? Harry asked, waving his wand and vanishing the sleeve. I suppose. Lockhart sighed. The sacrifices I make, I swear. Sacrifices? Ginny sputtered. It's a sleeve. And you don't even have the sword of Gryffindor, so how are you going to explain that? You know, Harry told her, annoyed. You sound a lot like Hermione right now. And don't worry. I filched the sword from Dumbledore's office months ago. He pulled the miniature sword out of his pocket, unshrunk it, and then cut through the basilisk's mouth to both infuse the sword with basilisk venom and to make it look like that caused the death in case it should ever come up. But how are you going to explain how you got the sword in the first place? Ginny demanded. Unless you're admitting to robberies? Harry looked shocked. Of course not. That'd be bad for my image. I'm going to say the Sorting Hat gave it to me in my time of need. Things like that have happened before, with the Sorting Hat providing what people need in a time of crisis, so Dumbledore should buy that. Harry held up his hand to forestall her next question. And before you ask, I gave Peeves 3 cases of dung bombs earlier this year with the understanding that he would get 6 more if he would take the Sorting Hat the minute he heard that there would be a lockdown and get it to me as soon as possible. Ginny paled. Are you really sure it's a good idea to enable him like that? Harry shrugged. What do I care? He likes me, calls me a good force of chaos, and whatnot. Besides, it's the only way I could possibly get the Sorting Hat without its absence being noticed too far in advance or its presence being noticed while I'm supposed to have it down here. How are you going to explain how you got the hat, then? Ginny was running out of questions, and for that Harry was grateful. He had already worked out all the details weeks ago and was starting to regret, just a little, of course, that he had refused Lockhart's suggestion of simply obliviating her and claiming that she had been unconscious the whole time. Fox, Dumbledore's phoenix that he can't possibly have kept an eye on this entire time, brought it to me for showing great loyalty to Dumbledore down here, Harry said smoothly. What? It's the kind of thing that he'd eat up, Harry explained. So how about it? Ginny looked torn. It was a much better story, but the Weasleys had raised her to be reasonably honest, so she wasn't sure. Lockhart put his hand on Harry's shoulder. Let me handle this. 5%. Ginny looked startled. Pardon? We'll give you 5% of the profit we're making for selling the basilisk parts, Lockhart elaborated. He glanced over at Luna. That goes for you too, of course. Oh goody, Luna said. Just think of the funding for future rare creature hunting expeditions. Well, right then. Lockhart looked a little thrown. So, what do you think, Miss Weasley? Are you sure Professor Dumbledore would let you sell the basilisk? It is technically Hogwarts property, after all, she pointed out. Since Voldemort and I are the only 2 British Parselmouths right now, he won't be able to get into the chamber, and if he tries to use me to get in he can use the basilisk. I'll refuse, citing trauma. Besides, Professor Lockhart already made arrangements for this to be taken care of, so all we need to do is send the dead basilisk to his preserver. As such, and Harry waved his wand, and the basilisk body disappeared accordingly, and there, completely out of Hogwarts grounds and good luck proving where we got it from. All right, Ginny agreed reluctantly. But only if you don't tell my parents. Why not? Lockhart asked. There's nothing technically illegal about giving you a share of the profits, even though we're basically bribing you because we can claim it's because you were here when we got rid of it. If my parents know, they'll make me put it in the bank and won't let me touch it until I'm 17, Ginny explained. I'm not saying I want to spend all of it now, but a little spending money would be nice. We agree to your terms, Harry said quickly, before she could change her mind or ask for a bigger cut. Luna? She looked up from where she was playing with Norbert on the floor. Oh, that should be fine. It doesn't really matter if my father finds out, however. He's always believed in the Chamber of Secrets, you know? I can imagine, Harry grinned. Aren't you glad we're going with a much more heroic version of events, Ginny? Not to mention a version that was almost identical to what had originally happened, so it wasn't even really lying all that much. Except for Lockhart's involvement, but that was kind of a giving where Lockhart was involved. How are we getting back up? Luna asked. Harry frowned. You know, I didn't really think of that. I guess we could walk back to where the entrance is, and I could take turns flying people up with me. If you could do that, then why did you push me down there instead of doing that in the first place? Lockhart looked annoyed again. Nostalgia, Harry said simply, and refused to elaborate. They were about to go when they heard moaning coming from near the statue. Harry could have kicked himself. He'd forgotten about Pettigrew. Again. God, Sirius was going to kill him. Harry quickly sprinted towards Pettigrew and drew his wand, aiming to stun him. Pettigrew was faster, however, and turned into his animagus form. Harry narrowed his eyes. There was no way in hell he'd let Pettigrew get away now. After all, what was the point in coming back in time if you let Pettigrew get away to go revive Voldemort in the exact same way? Harry dropped his wand and transformed into his own animagus form, ignoring the gasps from Lockhart and Ginny. He lunged at Pettigrew, thanking God that the rat hadn't gotten very far because there were a lot of rats down here. Although how Pettigrew thought he'd be able to get out of the chamber was beyond him. Maybe Lockhart had a point about the whole stairs thing. Either way, Pettigrew was no longer a Parselmouth, and so he couldn't possibly be able to utilize any of that, and caught him in his mouth. He slithered over towards his companions for, of course, his animagus form was a snake, and observed their reactions. Ginny and Lockhart looked shell-shocked while Luna, naturally, appeared to be completely unfazed. That wasn't surprising. What was surprising was when she took out a jar, plucked Pettigrew from Harry's mouth, and placed in the jar before screwing the lid on. Are you sure that's going to hold him? Harry asked once he'd transformed back. Other than the fact that if he tried to transform, he'd cut himself on all the glass and very possibly kill himself. Yes, my father made this jar animagus-proof in case I ever ran into one I didn't want to get away, Luna explained. And you carry that around with you everywhere? Lockhart asked her. Of course, she said serenely. One never knows when one will run into an animagus one doesn't wish to escape. Well, that's convenient, Harry said, still a little confused. Almost as convenient as you suddenly having a snake animagus form, Ginny countered. Harry waved her suspicion off. Oh, please, I've been an animagus for years now. You're only a second year, though, she protested. What can I say? I'm very talented, Harry said modestly. Ginny snorted. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because it's illegal to be an animagus when you're not of age, yet, Harry explained as if it were obvious. Which it was. Especially for someone whose dad worked in the ministry. Now, if that's all. He looked to Ginny, clearly expecting her to find some other problem with what was going on. She just sighed, however. Let's go, then. Myrtle was a little depressed when they got back. Not only were they all still alive. Although she was grateful once Harry pointed out that if he had become a ghost and hung out with her, she'd never get any peace from anyone ever due to Harry's mild attention-seeking tendencies, but Peeves had been tormenting her as he waited for Harry to get back to give him the sorting hat. When Harry handed over the promised 6 cases of dung bombs, Ginny looked like the next few days were going to be more terrifying than her entire experience as Diary, Riddle's hostage. Eventually, Harry, Lockhart, Ginny, Luna, and the captured Pettigrew made their way up to Dumbledore's office, where they found Dumbledore, Arthur and Molly Weasley, Xenophilius Lovegood, Minerva McGonagall, Severus Snape, Rita Skeeter, and a man that Harry could only assume was his godfather. We're alive, Harry announced cheerfully. Oh, Ginny, Molly exclaimed tearfully, pulling her daughter into a hug. Are you okay? What happened? I'm fine, Mom, Ginny assured. As to what happened, well, maybe I should let Harry and Professor Lockhart explain that. Did you have fun, Luna? Xenophilius asked, after examining her for hidden wounds and finding none. "Oh yes," Luna said. "I didn't much like getting kidnapped or Norbert getting petrified, but other than that the rescue was quite interesting. Is there a reason you felt the need to go running off on a suicidal rescue mission without informing a responsible adult first?" Snape asked Harry in between sneering at probably Sirius, who he seemed to have taken an instant dislike to. Harry was sure probably Sirius was completely innocent in the matter. "I did get a responsible adult," Harry said innocently. "Professor Lockhart is a Hogwarts professor, and surely Professor Dumbledore wouldn't have hired him if he didn't have complete faith in him." McGonagall coughed delicately, but didn't say anything to contradict him. "So, Mr. Malfoy, is it true that Rita Skeeter began?" "I'm afraid you have me confused with someone else," Harry said apologetically. "I'm Harry Potter." He paused. "And yes, I did go down to the Chamber of Secrets." It took 20 minutes before the room was quiet enough for Harry to tell the story of what went down, sticking to the version they had agreed upon, and embellishing quite a bit, and Harry was pleased to note that Rita was using her quick-quote quill so as to make everything even more over the top. And since Rita was, for some ungodly reason, a well-respected journalist, everyone would take her word that things went down like Harry claimed they did. "What about Peter?" was the first thing probably Sirius wanted to know. Harry winced. I kind of forgot about him." "What do you mean you kind of forgot about him?" Definitely, Sirius looked downright murderous. "Fortunately, he woke up before we could leave, and then we caught him," Harry hastened to reassure him. "So, you only caught him because of chance?" Sirius wasn't very happy about that. "Just be glad we caught him at all," Harry advised. "What do you mean by you caught Peters?" Dumbledore asked. "Who is this Peter?" Luna answered before Harry could. "Peter Pettigrew, illegal Ratanimagus and secret Death Eater extraordinaire," she said, sounding quite like an auctioneer as she pulled out the jar. "Oh, good thinking, Luna." Xenophilius beamed with pride as he recognized the jar. Luna took off the lid and placed Pettigrew gingerly on the floor. Before he could make a break for it, Sirius had his wand out and shot a spell at him to force him to revert back to human form. "Peter Pettigrew," McGonagall gasped, firmly identifying him for the somewhat skeptical Ginny. "But you, in black, You said you wanted to see me, Dumbledore?" Fudge asked, flinging open the door to Dumbledore's office and followed, for whatever reason, by Lucius Malfoy. "Peter Pettigrew? Didn't you blow up?" "As it happens, I did not call for you, Cornelius," Dumbledore said genially, taking this all in stride. "But it's a good thing you're here. We were just about to question Mr. Pettigrew about his survival, shall we say? Severus? Would you?" Snape nodded jerkily and moved towards the panicked Pettigrew to administer some Veritaserum. I wanted to tell you," Pettigrew said desperately, "about my being alive. But I was afraid. Sirius wanted me dead, and I was, very depressed after what happened with Lily and James that I just wanted to, lose myself." "So you chose to be a rat?" Lucius asked incredulously. "Dear God, you really are an idiot, aren't you?" Pettigrew opened his mouth to respond, and Snape took that opportunity to force the drops of Veritaserum down his throat. "I'll handle this if you don't mind, Cornelius?" Dumbledore asked politely. Seeing no objection, he continued, "What is your name?" "Peter Pettigrew." "Why didn't you tell anyone you were alive?" Dumbledore began. "I was afraid," Pettigrew repeated. Harry decided this would probably take too long if the extraordinarily patient Dumbledore was left in charge of the interrogation, and he just wanted to get clearing Sirius over with before his polyjuice potion ran out. "Did you kill those muggles that died after Sirius confronted you about my parents' deaths?" "Yes." Everyone looked rather shocked at that. "Well, except for Luna and her father, who were never really shocked at anything, and Lucius, who probably knew it all along. Are you a Death Eater?" Harry quickly followed up. "Yes." "Is Sirius a Death Eater?" Harry finished his questions. "No." "Well, there you go," Harry said, crossing his arms. "So, when will the pardon be done with?" Pardon?" Fudge asked, confused. "Well, naturally," Harry nodded. "And I'd hurry up with that. Otherwise, When Rita writes that article and everyone hears how you refuse to let a clearly innocent dash, Snape snorted at this. Man, go. The court of public opinion will string you up. Fudge looked lost. Will he hurry this up? Sirius asked. I am so not in the mood. As the actress said to the bishop, Harry said immediately. Sirius looked confused. Okay? Just reminding you that we're British, Harry said cheerfully. Seeing as how you've apparently forgotten. Sirius rolled his eyes. Dear God, Harry, I went to Las Vegas. I didn't apply for citizenship.
He smirked.
Although that's what she said rolls off the tongue so much better. All right, I'll do it, Fudge decided before Harry had the chance to hex his errant godfather. Harry looked up. Dumbledore had apparently spent the last 5 minutes appealing to Fudge's public approval rating, and even though Lucius looked furious, he seemed to have succeeded. I just need to draw up the paperwork and dash, Fudge began. Way ahead of you, Harry interrupted, pulling out an official pardon for Sirius he'd bribed several people to obtain. Sign here, please. Oh, and you too, Professor. Looking slightly bemused, Fudge did so. Looking incredibly amused and not at all concerned about how Harry had gotten a hold of the pardon in the first place, Dumbledore followed. Freedom. At last. Sirius cheered right as the polyjuice potion wore off. Does everything always work out this conveniently for you? Ginny asked incredulously as Fudge clutched his heart in shock and tried, and failed, not to look terrified. Pretty much, yeah, Harry affirmed. Lucius just looked disgusted before storming to the door, no doubt resolving to go look for a minion to support for Minister of Magic, who was less influenced by Dumbledore. Harry thought he saw Dobby lurking outside the door, and decided to take a chance and hope this worked. Hey, Mr. Malfoy, he called out. Lucius spun to face him. What? He snapped. Catch, he said, pulling the dragon-high gloves out of his pocket and throwing them at him. Lucius caught them an inch from his face and tossed them aside, wordlessly sneering at Harry. Harry watched in amusement as Dobby dived halfway across the hallway to catch the gloves. Let's go, Dobby, Lucius commanded, continuing to stalk down the hallway without checking to see that Dobby was following him. Eventually, when Lucius tried to hit Dobby over the head with his cane to make himself feel better about how spectacularly poorly everything in the office went, he noticed Dobby hadn't moved. He was holding up Harry's probably poisonous gloves like they were priceless treasures. Master has given Dobby gloves, Dobby said in wonderment. Master gave them to Dobby. What's that? Spat Lucius. What did you say? Dobby has got a pair of gloves, said Dobby in disbelief. Master threw them, and Dobby caught them, and Dobby is free. Lucius Malfoy stood frozen, staring at the elf. Then he lunged at Harry. You've lost me my servant, boy. But Dobby shouted, You shall not harm Harry Potter. There was a loud bang, and Mr. Malfoy was thrown backwards. He crashed down the stairs, 3 at a time, landing in a crumpled heap on the landing below. He got up, his face livid, and pulled out his wand, but Dobby raised a long, threatening finger. You shall go now, he said fiercely, pointing down at Mr. Malfoy. You shall not touch Harry Potter. You shall go now. And Dobby thought you should know that the reason people laugh when they think you're not looking is because they think that bad Master Draco is not your son. Lucius Malfoy's eyes burned with outrage, but Dobby gave him no choice. With a last, incensed stare at the pair of them, he swung his cloak around him and hurried out of sight, probably to ask Narcissa some very awkward questions. Harry couldn't believe that after everything, Lucius finally managed to hear the rumors, or that it was Dobby that finally told him. He would have done it ages ago, but he had promised Draco he wouldn't. Well, sort of promised. And besides, Harry knew it would mean more coming from Dobby. He headed back to Dumbledore's office where he heard Snape and Sirius arguing loudly. You tried to kill me. Sirius was yelling. We were at war. Snape defended himself. It looked pretty personal to me, Sirius countered. You proved you're a bloodthirsty killer when you were 16. Snape snapped. Molly and Arthur looked disturbed at that, and Sirius quickly said, It wasn't that bad, really. And besides, you have got to learn to let these things go. Carrying around a decade's worth of resentment cannot possibly be good for you. Harry snorted. Hypocrite. Chapter 26. Despite himself, Harry quite enjoyed the impromptu all-night. The school is no longer at risk, and we didn't even have to do anything party immediately following everyone's departure from Dumbledore's office. It was a bit late notice, but that was nothing more than cause for both anxiety and celebration for the Hogwarts house elves. As Harry had quite a flair for the dramatic, it was only natural that he was a gifted storyteller, and so the entire student body seemed quite eager to hear Harry's tale, none more so than the thrill-seeking Gryffindors. He delighted in regaling his housemates with the official version of the tale, to Ginny's great annoyance, and only stopped when it came time for points to be announced. The minute Dumbledore started listing the current point tallies, Harry ran like his life depended on it to the Slytherin table again. Glancing at Harry oddly, Dumbledore nonetheless continued his recitation. In first place, we have Gryffindor House with 638 points. In second place, we have Slytherin with 427 points. In third place, we have Ravenclaw with 383 points. And in fourth place, we have Hufflepuff with 358 points. No one was particularly surprised by this news. It had become quite clear early on this year, if not by the end of last year, that, despite his best efforts, Harry Potter was simply not capable of losing the House Cup. What happened next did surprise people quite a bit. "Congratulations, Gryffindor, and well done." Dumbledore beamed in Harry's general direction. But before you start celebrating, recent events must be taken into consideration. This has been a very trying year for all of us, working to keep the unfortunate basilisk infestation and inconvenient hospitalizations out of the paper. Had the Board of Governors or the Ministry gotten word of this before it was taken care of, well, I shudder to think of what might have happened then. However, I'm pleased to inform you that the basilisk has been defeated by Professor Lockhart and 3 exceptional students. In light of this, I have a few last-minute points to distribute. Not again, a Ravenclaw upperclassman who Harry only vaguely recognized groaned. There were several murmurs of agreement from various other non-Gryffindors, which the headmaster blithely ignored. First, to Ms. Luna Lovegood and Ms. Ginevra Weasley for remaining calm and collected in a hostage situation, as well as assisting with catching the perpetrator, I award Gryffindor and Ravenclaw each 200 points. Dumbledore paused here, clearly expecting applause, but everyone was too stunned at a non-Gryffindor garnering some last-minute points to do anything but stare at him. And to Mr. Harry Potter for his quick thinking, resourcefulness, selflessness, responsibility in alerting a faculty member, and bravery, I award Gryffindor 400 points. "I don't believe it," Harry moaned dejectedly. "I mean, I do, but I wish I didn't. 600 extra points, that's, what, 1238? This almost doubled our points. I know I'm supposed to be Dumbledore's favorite student and all, but it sure doesn't seem like it sometimes." "I can't believe it," Draco echoed Harry's sentiment. "A Ravenclaw coming in second place? Slytherin in third? I think I'm in shock. Or maybe this is all one big long nightmare. Maybe this whole year is just one never-ending nightmare. I probably got a concussion on the train when you and the weasel fell from the sky. Any minute now I'll wake up in the hospital wing." "Amen to that," Harry said fervently. "You know," Daphne Greengrass said thoughtfully, "I've just noticed that every year, it always comes down to either Gryffindor or Slytherin winning the House Cup and Ravenclaw maybe coming in second, depending on how good their Quidditch team is. Or depending on whether or not one of them goes along with the headmaster's pet student's annual suicide attempt. Why is it that Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff never win? I mean, obviously they're less likely to engage in the foolish heroics that is the Gryffindor claim to fame or strategizing like we do, but you'd think it would happen every once in a while." "I am not Dumbledore's pet student," Harry protested. "And I'm not suicidal. It's just that, well, everything always seems to revolve around me." Theodore not looked up from his pudding. "Yes, you are on both counts. You're also incredibly full of yourself." Harry sent him a withering glare. "No one asked you. And no one asked you to sit here," Theodore pointed out. "And yet, here we both are." Harry opened his mouth and then quickly closed it again. "That was actually a very good point. To answer your question, Daphne," Draco said, smirking at Harry's speechlessness, "the houses are usually pretty evenly matched for most of the year. After all, Gryffindors often get points for their rash actions, and they lose them just as easily. We get plenty of points as well, but have an unfortunate number of confrontations that often cost us. Ravenclaws get points for sheer brilliance, and the Hufflepuffs rake in their share by just consistently doing what they're supposed to do. At the end of the year, Gryffindors inevitably pull some big stupid stunt that will either succeed and propel them into first place or fail miserably and give Ravenclaw a chance to come in second. We go all out on our attempts to win points, and in the absence of something like Harry slaying a basilisk or saving the Philosopher's Stone, we usually win. Ravenclaws are usually too busy studying to worry too much about how the House Cup would suit their overachieving nature, and as for the Hufflepuffs, what are they going to do? Do exactly what they're supposed to do more. You've put a lot of thought into this, Harry said, startled, as soon as he regained his powers of speech. Draco shot him an incredulous look. I'm a Malfoy. Surely you don't think we just get by on our looks and wealth?
Air.
As it happened, that was exactly what Harry thought. It's all about strategy, Draco explained. There are a lot of very rich people, and with the resources magic affords us, a lot of very pretty people as well. If you want to have an edge, you've got to put some thought into it. Harry wasn't quite sure how to respond to that, and so was quite relieved when Lockhart leaned over to say something to Dumbledore, who quickly stood up again. It has been brought to my attention that I have neglected to mention that once again, our defense against the dark arts professor will be leaving us at the end of the year. I am happy to report that, unlike his predecessor, Professor Lockhart is perfectly all right and will, in fact, be retiring to write his new book Baiting the Basilisk. Professor Lockhart has asked me to tell you that anyone who wishes to be quoted in the book should approach him before the end of term. Harry quickly glanced over at the Gryffindor table. Ginny looked mutinous. Guess she didn't want to be included in the book, then. Harry figured that he might as well say goodbye to Lockhart before he left, seeing as how he had put a great deal of effort into preventing him from getting brain damaged that year. So, how many people did volunteer to help with your book? Harry asked curiously. Easily 3/4 of the students. In fact, I may have to publish a separate book with all of their accounts. Lockhart looked delighted at the prospect. I'm not sure what I'd call it, though. Harry shrugged. Don't ask me. I'm not a wordsmith. Try asking Luna. She came up with Baiting the Basilisk after all. Yes, that is a clever title, Lockhart agreed. It's nice to see she's doing something to earn that 5%. Luna's naturally helpful like that, Harry said shortly. That she is, Lockhart agreed, holding out that day's edition of the Daily Prophet. Did you see the article your reporter friend wrote? It's quite a nice touch. Intrigued, Harry took the proffered paper. Basilisk and Black Invade Hogwarts, by Rita Skeeter. Rumors have been flying for months now that Hogwarts headmaster Albus Dumbledore has been hiding the reopening of the Chamber of Secrets, and a basilisk has been running amok, petrifying anyone in its path. Despite these insistences and a visit by Hogwarts Governor Lucius Malfoy and Minister of Magic Cornelius Fudge, no trace of this alleged basilisk was found. Until now, that is. Yesterday, this reporter was contacted by an anonymous party claiming to represent Harry Potter and told that Hogwarts was about to reveal the mystery surrounding the castle all year. Skeptical but intrigued, this reporter quickly made her way to Dumbledore's office, where the Weasley and Lovegood families and Professor Severus Snape were already waiting. Shortly thereafter, Professor Gilderoy Lockhart came charging in along with first years Ginevra Weasley and Luna Lovegood and Harry Potter himself. Upon questioning, this reporter discovered that these heroes had just discovered a previously unknown basilisk lurking in a hidden chamber, deep beneath the school. The fabled Chamber of Secrets, perhaps. Details on page 5? As Lockhart and Potter launched into their heroic tale, details on page 3, it was revealed that the mastermind behind the basilisk attack and kidnapping of Lovegood and Weasley was none other than Peter Pettigrew, long-dead war hero, Order of Merlin first-class recipient, and apparently illegal animagus. Stunned, Fudge and Dumbledore quickly agreed to pardon Azkaban escapee Sirius Black, as Pettigrew was clearly not blown up and, upon questioning, confessed to the other murders Black was imprisoned for. Details on page 4. And not a moment too soon, as this reporter's contacts Polyjuice Potion, which grants the user the ability to assume someone else's form for an hour, wore off and was revealed to be none other than the recently pardoned Black himself. Black had apparently been tracking Pettigrew for over a year now in order to prove his innocence. Black's story on page 7. Says Black, I am understandably very frustrated at the years I spent wrongfully imprisoned by. I am confident that now that the truth is out, justice will be served, and I intend to seek custody of my godson, Harry Potter, and move on with my life. When asked, Potter had this to say on the subject, I will admit that I do not know Sirius very well, but I am firmly convinced that he is only my best interests at heart and feel that a magical environment would be better suited for me than the muggle one I have spent most of my life in. Besides, Sirius was my father's best friend and the person my parents entrusted my safety to in the event anything happened to them. Living with Sirius is something that I want, and what's more, it's what my parents would have wanted. Though this all took place in Dumbledore's office, he was unavailable for comment. Well, Harry, it's been quite an adventure this year, Lockhart said when Harry had finished. And what's more, I didn't even have to erase anyone's memories. I'm not quite sure how I feel about that. I strongly feel like I should, but there really doesn't seem to be much of a need. Does there? Either way, I enjoyed mentoring you, and I think I might actually miss you. That's sweet, Harry grinned. Because God knows that I'm going to miss the opportunity to find out whether or not it is, in fact, possible to beat someone to death with a paper napkin. Chin up, Lockhart said cheerfully. You have 5 more years to get around to that. Harry spent this train ride home, as he had the last one, desperately evading Hermione's attempts to pester him about his phenomenal test scores. The exams had actually been less painful this year than the year before. Partly, Harry supposed, because the material was slightly more challenging, and partly because he hadn't actually taken exams his original second year. So, what are your plans for this summer? Ron eventually asked. I'd ask you to come stay again, but I think Ginny would pitch a fit. Ginny hadn't quite managed to get over her disappointment in the week or so since her rescue, but Harry wasn't worried. After all, it's not like she could stay mad at him forever. Well, probably. She was a Weasley, after all, and only ended up forgiving Percy because Fred had died and she didn't want to lose another brother unnecessarily. Don't worry about it, Harry said easily. After Sirius threatened to sue Dumbledore, Fudge, and half the Ministry for wrongful imprisonment due to his lack of a trial, and said he'd tell everyone I was kidnapped after my parents' deaths and forced to live with a bunch of magic-hating muggles, Fudge kind of overruled Dumbledore and granted him custody. Because your godfather threatened him? Hermione was shocked. That's preposterous. Dumbledore should have dash. Dumbledore was probably thinking about his career. He is a politician after all, Neville pointed out. As is Fudge. Besides, as Harry's godfather, Sirius Black has legal rights to Harry should his biological family choose to give theirs up dash. Which they did. Harry cut in. The lawyer could barely get the words out before they agreed. Most people would assume this meant that they hated me, but Dumbledore got all teary-eyed and went on about how moved he was that they would give up the rights to their precious nephew in a sweet, if misguided, attempt to make him happy. And unless Dumbledore wants to explain to the Wisengamot and the wizarding population at large that he felt that a then 1-year-old and current 12-year-old is the key to defeating you-know-who, there's really nothing he can do, Neville concluded. But it's still not right, Hermione insisted. Harry shrugged. Yeah, well, neither is locking my godfather in prison for 10 years without a trial because he didn't want to have to cede custody of me. Hermione just gaped at him for a few seconds. I acknowledge this is a terrible miscarriage of justice, but surely you aren't suggesting that Professor Dumbledore could have done something different and didn't simply because he wanted you to be with people who hated you. I don't know, Hermione, Ron said uncertainly. He is the chief warlock even back then, not to mention the supreme mugwump. He probably could have done something. How can you say that? Hermione demanded. He's Dumbledore. He dash. Isn't perfect, and maybe it's time you just accepted that, Harry interrupted, tiredly. Anyway, as I was saying, after Sirius got custody of me, he and Luna's dad started talking, and Sirius decided it might be fun to go looking for rare, and some might consider, fictional characters. Since I found the crumple-horned snorcack, we have to find something new to look for, but that proved my prowess as a tracker. You're doing that the whole summer? Neville said, his voice carefully neutral. That's great for you. Oh, not the whole summer, Harry assured him. I also got an early start on my divination and saw that the Ron's dad will win the annual Daily Profit Grand Prize Galleon draw and head to Egypt to visit Bill. So Sirius and I plan to spend a month there as well. Win the grand prize. Ron sounded incredulous. You're going to travel to a foreign country for a month on the off chance your prediction comes true? Hermione sounded skeptical, and Harry was fairly sure she was restraining herself from saying more. Well, I really just want to see Fred and George try and shut Percy in a pyramid, Harry admitted. But I'm sure I'll have fun, even if that doesn't end up happening. Harry dear, Mrs. Weasley gushed after she had greeted her own children. How nice to see you again. Hello, Mrs. Weasley, Harry greeted warmly. Have you met my godfather, Sirius Black? Mrs. Weasley's smile became slightly fixed. She had heard of the acquittal, of course, but was clearly uncomfortable when faced with said ex-con face-to-face. I heard you have custody of Harry now. Sirius beamed. It's been 8 days today. Are you sure that you're up to the challenge, so soon after coming back to Wizarding Society? Mrs. Weasley asked tentatively. Harry's a great kid, and Dumbledore has been a great help in the whole reintegration process, Sirius said cheerfully. Couldn't have done it without him. You know, it means the world to me to be able to take in Lily and James' son. They were family to me. I'm glad I can finally fulfill their wishes and try and keep their memory alive for their son.
Oh.
Mrs. Weasley's voice was noticeably warmer at the thought of Harry having a link to his parents at last. While they continued to talk, Harry looked around the station idly. Hey, Draco, Harry said, walking up to him. Listen, I wanted to thank you for all your help this year with Dob Dash. Draco looked distinctively uncomfortable as he indicated a rather put-out Narcissa Malfoy. Harry, this is my mother. Mother, this is Harry Potter. Narcissa's smile chilled Harry to the bone. A pleasure, I'm sure. Harry translated that to be something along the lines of, you better hope you never run into me in a dark alley, or so help me. What was the deal with her? Ready to go, Harry's? Sirius asked, coming up behind him. Cousin Narcissa. How are you? If anything, her smile grew even colder. Sirius, I was so glad to hear of your acquittal. Now, if you'll excuse us. Wow, Harry said finally. I don't ever remember her so cold before. Well, that's because you never saw her with me, Sirius laughed. Ooh, what happened? Harry asked. Well, there might have been an incident 7th year during a Hogsmeade weekend when she was out with her boyfriend involving a frog, a bottle of pink hair dye, and a trampoline, Sirius admitted. Do tell, Harry encouraged. First of all, I fully deny any and all involvement. My presence, along with James, Remus, and he who is not worth mentioning, was completely coincidental, as was James' camera. It all started when, and with that, Godfather and Godson headed off to what promised to be the carefree summer either of them had had for quite some time. Chapter 27. It had been a good summer, Harry reflected as he sat across from his godfather at Florian Fortescue's ice cream parlor. True, he, Sirius, Luna, and her father had had little luck tracking the blibbering humdinger in Zaire, and true that he had been forced to speak French for nearly 6 weeks. This was, naturally, the worst thing that had happened to him in recent memory, though Sirius was unsympathetic told him he was just being dramatic, but he had had fun anyway. His and Sirius's month in Egypt, after the Weasleys had, in fact, won the 700 galleon draw, had been even more amusing. Although Percy had joined Ginny in the not speaking to Harry's department after Harry had distracted Mrs. Weasley while Fred and George had locked him in a pyramid. He didn't see what the big deal was anyway. Percy was only in there for 3 hours and had confessed afterwards that he had learned quite a bit that he wouldn't otherwise have an opportunity to because he was unsupervised. Apparently, while the new head boy had come to expect behavior like that from the twins, he had expected better of Harry. Do you think they're done with their school supply shopping yet? Harry asked. I'm bored. Sirius, who had been thoughtfully eyeing a group of rather pretty witches, blinked, and looked over at him. "You're the one who hired Dobby to do yours for you," he reminded him. "Well, yeah, but it didn't occur to me that I'd be stuck waiting here for everyone else to finish theirs," Harry complained. "Yes, who would have thought that Hermione would freak out that you were paying Dobby below minimum wage? And yes, I know he insisted on it." Sirius held up a hand to forestall Harry's protest. "Ron would get insulted that you were rubbing it in his face that you're so rich you won't even do your own shopping. Ginny still wouldn't be speaking to you. And Luna and Neville would be off to prove that Rackspurts have infested Ollivanders." "It's a conspiracy, I tell you," Harry said forlornly. "You've still got me," Sirius said brightly. Harry didn't respond. Sirius rolled his eyes. "Well, you could have tagged along with them anyway," he pointed out. "That would totally defeat the purpose of me paying Dobby to do it for me," Harry said, sounding shocked. "I wonder why Draco always insists on doing his own shopping." "House elves have notoriously poor color scheme," Draco replied, the shop door slamming shut behind him. "Pinch me, I must be dreaming," Harry said to Sirius, who immediately did so. "Draco Malfoy has remembered that I exist." Draco crossed his arms irritably. "I never forgot." "Then why didn't you reply to any of the 37 letters I've sent you this summer?" Harry demanded. "Other than the fact that most of them were full of meaningless drivel about people I don't care about?" Draco asked. At Harry's nod, he continued, "Once my father found out about that stupid rumor you started, and we all know you did, so don't bother denying it. He and my mother have been fighting, and so they forbid me from having anything to do with you. And also because they think your new guardian might be a bad influence. Like they're one to talk." Sirius grumbled. "And you're having something to do with him right now?" Draco grinned. Harry was sure that as a result somewhere a puppy just died. "I'm officially a teenager. I've got to get that rebellion in somehow, don't I? Anyway, my mother's just finishing up with Madame Malkin, so I've got to go. Be seeing you, Harry." Bye." Harry replied distractedly. He turned to Sirius. "That was weird." "Indeed it was," Sirius agreed. "Me? A bad influence?" "Some people." "Well, you are a recently pardoned fugitive who spent who knows how many years in Azkaban," Harry pointed out tactfully. "My record was expunged," Sirius countered. "That means that legally, it never happened, and I've decided to refuse to acknowledge that it did. Besides, Lucius is a Death Eater. He was cleared of all charges, so legally he isn't," Harry pointed out. Sirius snorted at that. "Speaking of Death Eaters, how do we stand on the diary front?" Harry frowned, confused for a moment until he realized that by diary, Sirius meant Horcrux, and that he was, for once, mindful that there were other people around him that could potentially be eavesdropping on them. "Well, we've stabbed the diary, burned the cup, locket, and diadem. The snake probably isn't one yet, and we can take care of her later. If she is one, I'm still one, so that just leaves the ring." "Where's the ring?" Sirius asked. "Can we take care of that today? You're going back to school tomorrow, and that severely restricts your movements." "That's true," Harry agreed slowly. "If I'm going, it'll have to be today. Does now work for you?" Sirius discreetly glanced at his watch. "All right. We need to hurry, though. I have a meeting with Dumbledore in 20 minutes. "Oh, really?" Harry asked as they got up to leave. "Why is that?" "If it works, you'll find out. If it doesn't, I'm not going to tell you," Sirius told him primly. "Now where did you say we were going?" "Little Hangington now. Wait, Little Hangleton," Harry corrected himself. "Are you sure you know where we're going?" Sirius asked suspiciously. "Of course. I just haven't been there in, let's see, 11 years. I think. And I never actually did go to the Gaunt Shack. Actually, I don't think I can give good enough instructions. I'll just have to apparate us both," Harry decided. "That'll probably work better anyway, because I'm technically too young to apparate, so we can pretend you're the one doing it." Sirius looked distinctly unhappy, but he did as Harry requested. Harry closed his eyes and did his best to recall the graveyard he'd been transported to at the end of his 4th year, where Cedric had. Harry felt a familiar yet unpleasant sensation around his navel, and he opened his eyes. He was standing in the graveyard. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Sirius said, looking around. "Can you be any more of an emo teenager?" "It's not my fault," Harry protested. "Voldemort was the one with the overdeveloped sense of melodrama. I was just kidnapped and forced to be here.
He paused.
Sirius, you fell through the veil in 1996. How do you even know the term emo? I'm a fan of the music, Sirius said delicately. Hey, can I borrow your time turner? What makes you think I have a time turner? Harry asked neutrally. I'm not even going to dignify that with a response, Sirius said, rolling his eyes. Okay, fine, I totally have one. What do you need it for? Don't you trust me? Sirius asked, looking wounded. No, not even slightly, Harry replied.
Please.
Give me a reason, Harry instructed. I'll buy you a firebolt. Harry removed the time turner from around his neck.
Deal.
Thanks, Sirius said, slipping it around his own neck. Say, didn't you say Voldemort resurrected himself using his dad's bones?
Yeah.
Harry said, wondering where this was going. Since we have nearly 2 years until Voldemort will try to revive himself, Sirius began. If history doesn't change that much, which, given our rather lackadaisical attitude towards things, isn't exactly a guarantee, Harry interjected. Sirius nodded.
Right.
If things still happen the way they should, we could destroy Riddle's bones, and the ritual wouldn't work. Harry thought about it. On the one hand, Voldemort not having a body would be a very good thing indeed. On the other, we can't do that. If he doesn't do the ritual, then he won't use my blood, anchoring my soul to this world, so I can die and come back. Therefore, there's no way for me to get rid of my Horcrux without me dying. And staying dead. Can we at least switch his father's bones with someone else's then? Maybe a more distant relative? That way it should still work, but maybe not as well, so it could weaken him, Sirius suggested. Good idea, Harry said. You do that while I go look for the shack. Once you're done, just apparate over to me. Sounds good, Sirius agreed, already moving among the graves, searching for someone to replace Tom Riddle Sr.'s earthly remains with. 10 minutes later, Harry had successfully managed to not only locate the location of the Gaunt Shack, but also the location of the ring, and he heard a loud crack outside indicating that Sirius had arrived. Did you find it?
Sirius asked.
And is that the skeleton of a snake nailed to the door? Of course, answered Harry, pointing. To both of them. I'm having trouble with one of the wards, though. Let me see. Sirius waved his wand over the point Harry had gestured to. I know how to deal with that. He muttered a spell under his breath. There. He reached down and picked up the ring. So this is the final Horcrux. Well, except for you, of course. Don't put it on, Harry warned. Dumbledore did, and it almost killed him. As it was, he only had a year left before he would have died from it, if Snape hadn't sped the process up. Uh-huh, Sirius said, clearly not listening and moving the ring closer to his finger, as if in a trance. Sirius, if you put that on, then Snape will have to save your life.
Snape.
Do you really want to give him something like that to hold over your head forever? I can see it now. You tried to kill me when we were 16, Black, and I saved your life 17 years later. It just goes to show that I get it. I get it, Sirius exclaimed, hastily dropping the ring. That's better. Now what do you say we get out of here, and just torch the place? Harry suggested. Works for me. All the dark magical residue. It feels like I never left home. With that, Harry and Sirius left the shack, and Sirius cast Fiendfire, ridding the world of one more piece of Tom Riddle Jr.'s soul and one incredibly ugly house. Sirius brought Harry back to Diagon Alley, then quickly ran off to his mysterious meeting with Dumbledore that he refused to explain about. Strangely, for all his earlier insistence before that he needed to be on time, he didn't seem to care that he ended up being 15 minutes late. Harry. Hermione greeted him, thrusting a huge bundle of orange fur into his arms. Ron and Neville came up behind her. Crookshanks? Harry ventured. Hermione gaped at him. But I only just decided. How did you do that? I told you. My scar is studying divination, Harry replied smugly. Oh, honestly, just because you're right about a few innocuous things you think you're the next coming of Cassandra or something, Hermione huffed. He was right about my dad and the Ministry Galleon draw, too, Ron reminded her. And pretty much everything else he's ever said would happen has happened, Neville added. He's either psychic or one hell of a con man. I don't see how you could possibly dispute the fact that I know the future, Harry said, secure in the knowledge that he did know at least one future, even if he was doing his best to change it for no other reason than sheer boredom and possibly to save a few lives. If he had time. You're not really taking divination, are you? Hermione asked, completely ignoring her friend's ribbing. Yep, Harry confirmed cheerfully. And Muggle studies and care of magical creatures. Why? Hermione wanted to know. Why not? You are, after all, Harry pointed out. I'm also taking such practical classes as arithmancy and ancient runes, Hermione shot back. Arithmancy, I'll give you, but I refuse to believe that ancient runes could possibly be practical, Harry said stubbornly. And I don't want to take either of them, because divination and Muggle studies will be so much easier. What about care of magical creatures? Ron asked. Charlie took that, and he said that it involves some real work. I know, Harry agreed, sounding rather put out. But I have to support Hagrid, don't I? Hagrid? Neville asked shrewdly. Is he our teacher then? Since his name was cleared last year, sort of when you told everybody about Voldemort opening the chamber 50 years ago. Ron flinched. Bloody hell. Not you too. Doesn't anybody have a healthy fear of the most terrifying wizard in living memory anymore? Harry was pleased to note that Ron was no longer calling Riddle the most terrifying wizard ever, as he and Hermione had finally managed to convince him that there was no objective way to judge something like that. Neville shrugged. My Grant is not calling him by the proper appellation is an insult to my parents' memories, he said quietly. Of course he's our teacher, Harry said, quickly changing the subject. Who else would assign us abiding books? It's a good thing the manager told us how to calm them, Hermione said. I can't imagine what I'd do if I had to figure it out by myself. Easiest 20 galleons I ever made. Harry grinned. You told the manager to stroke the spines? Ron asked, surprised.
Yep.
He was already fed up with them just from trying to store them, and so he was more than happy to hand it over. Harry smiled. The four of them sat talking for another half an hour or so before Harry said innocently, So, Ron, you and Crookshanks sure seem to be getting along. Are you a closet cat person? Maybe not closeted, but recently discovered, Ron replied. After all, cats eat rats. So they do, Harry laughed. His vision was then blocked by a large broomstick-shaped package. What? It cost nearly all of my reparation money, but I got you your damn broomstick, Sirius said, moving into Harry's line of sight. Now stop guilt-tripping me about my lack of presents during your formative years and all the Christmas, birthdays, Halloweens, Easters, etc. that I missed, and the corresponding gifts that I owe you. You guilt-tripped him about missing significant life events while he was in Azkaban? Hermione asked, horrified. Hey, Harry said defensively. It's not like he doesn't do the same thing. It's always, James would have done it, or sometimes, Harry, I just get nostalgic and wish James were here. Hermione just continued to stare, so Harry moved on. So, how'd your mysterious meeting with the headmaster go? Sirius grinned broadly. Excellent. In fact, you're looking at Hogwarts's newest professor. Harry shot him a look. You're going to teach defense against the dark arts? But what about Remus? Sirius looked shocked. Harry, I would never deprive Moony of his chance to act all responsible and put his years of tutoring to waste. He's still going to be teaching data. So, what are you teaching? Neville asked. History of magic, Sirius replied happily. What about Professor Binns? Hermione asked. I hadn't thought he was looking to retire. Plus, he's got tenure, so it's not like they can really fire him because he's boring. Sirius looked mildly uncomfortable. Well, during my interview, McGonagall came in and informed us that Binns had been mysteriously exorcised a little while ago. Imagine, while we were sitting here eating ice cream, poor Binns was ascending to a higher plane. Harry suddenly knew what Sirius had wanted his time-turner for. Imagine that. Suddenly, a thought struck him. Wait, so we're going to have 2 Marauders as teachers? That is so awesome. Sirius grinned evilly. An old Snively will never know what hit him. Chapter 28. Can we please sit down now, Harry? Hermione asked after Harry had dragged her, Ron, and Neville after him while he systematically searched the entire train twice. If you haven't found whoever you're looking for by now, you're not going to find them. And look, Ginny and Luna are in the next compartment. Let's go in there. But I haven't found Professor Lupin yet.
Harry protested.
Hermione's eye twitched. You mean to say we've spent the last 20 minutes traipsing around with all our luggage because you're looking for a teacher? Yes. Harry scratched the back of his head nervously and wondered why Hermione looked like she was 2 seconds away from beating him with her trunk. Professors don't ride the train with the students, Harry, Ron added, giving him a look that implied that he was convinced Harry had recently, or not so recently, depending on how you looked at it, suffered a severe head injury. This is our 3rd year. Surely by now you've grasped that fact. I know. Harry did not appreciate Ron's lack of faith. But I just thought that Professor Lupin might. Why? Neville asked. Because he's weird like that? Harry suggested. Hermione sighed noisily. At least you're not bringing your scar into it this time. Now come on. Let's sit down before Harry thinks of somewhere else we can look. You know, you didn't have to come with me, Harry said defensively as they headed off to join Ginny and Luna. His friends exchanged looks. Yes, we did, they chorused. After all, who knows what you'd get up to when left to your own devices? Neville asked rhetorically. Good point, Harry deadpanned. After all, the last time that happened, Sirius and I defiled someone's grave, burned down a house, vandalized a family heirloom, and expedited Bin's journey to the afterlife. It was a measure of how often Harry said things like this that they all completely failed to react. I'm sure you had a good reason, Luna said cheerfully. Except for that last one. I suspect, that you just wanted to spend some quality time with your new guardian. There's nothing wrong with wanting to connect to new family members, right, Ginny? Harry turned to the redhead. She studiously ignored him, as she had been doing all summer. No matter though, they had a long train ride ahead of them, and sooner or later, she'd have to talk to him, if only to hex him. Sure enough, the next few hours passed very quickly with Harry annoying everyone by ending everything he said with a, right, Ginny? What do you think, Ginny? Or something else to that effect. Then, just as the conductor made the announcement that they were nearing Hogwarts and might want to start changing, Ginny snapped, All right already. I'll talk to you if you just shut up. Harry beamed. Of course, I dash. He broke off as Ginny glared pointedly at him, and he mimed zipping his lips. Good, Ginny said, satisfied. Now you boys get out of here. We need to change. Obediently, the boys trudged out. Wow. You broke through the silent treatment through sheer annoyance, Ron said, sounding slightly odd. And it only took 3 months, Harry smiled self-deprecatingly. Don't feel bad, Harry, Neville said, patting him on the back. It's not like you even saw her at all during most of June and all of July. You can come in now, Hermione said, opening the compartment door and slipping out, followed by the Ginny and Luna. Once inside the compartment, Ron and Neville began pulling on their robes while Harry had a staring contest with Hedwig. He was fairly certain he would lose as he didn't think owls were actually capable of blinking, but then, you never knew. As he did so, it occurred to him that he and Sirius had completely forgotten to get Ron an owl to make up for the trauma of having to actually spend time with Peter Pettigrew. Not that Ron was likely to accept charity or anything like that. Speaking of owls, though. Hey Ron, when did your sister get an owl? Harry asked, turning automatically to look at his friend. Yesterday. Remember? I wanted to know how she could afford that, even with the remainder of the galleon draw paying for our school supplies, and she flew off the handle and asked if I was accusing her of being a thief, and well, it only went downhill from there, Ron recounted, a little sheepishly. Was this when you were shopping? Because remember, Sirius and I were committing various crimes then. There are ice cream crimes? Neville asked innocently. Harry made a face at him, then remembered that he was in the middle of a staring contest with his owl. You blinked while I wasn't looking, didn't you? He accused. Disgusted, he turned back towards his human companions. What's her name, anyway? Pigwidgeon, Ron said gloomily. Harry blinked, surprised by the coincidence, but then he remembered. Ginny had named Ron's owl last time, hadn't she? And how do you not remember our fight? We were still having it at dinner last night until Mum threatened to hex us. Harry tilted his head back, trying to remember. Really? What was I doing at the times? You, Fred, and George were giving Mrs. Weasley suggestions, Neville supplied helpfully. Oh, that's right. She never did take us up any of them, though,
Harry said.
There was a knock on the door. Are you guys done in there? Hermione called. Yep, Harry said, opening the door for the girls to file back in. Did an gubular/gilter eat your robes, Harry? Luna inquired politely. Oh, no, nothing like that, Harry assured her. I've just decided that wearing robes everywhere is a very sheep-like thing to do, and so I'm not going to do so except when I'm in class. Are you even allowed to do that? Hermione asked skeptically. Harry shrugged. Who knows? Best case scenario. I'll lose us the House Cup this year. Don't you mean worst case scenario? Ginny asked. Harry snorted.
Yes, Ginny.
By best, I actually meant worst. However did you know? Oh, I figured all those Raxperts you and Luna are always talking about must have set up a colony in your head, and so you get confused easily, Ginny replied easily. Thank you for being so understanding, Harry told her dryly. My pleasure, she replied sweetly. Well, at least she was talking to him again. It was, Harry decided as he helped himself to some mashed potatoes, almost surreal to see Sirius sitting at the staff table. It was even stranger to see casually pointing his wand at Sirius's heart while he ate, and Remus keep shooting guilty looks in Sirius's direction. They really should have guessed that Remus's failure to contact Sirius once he was officially pardoned and the real story came out would be to his far too well-developed guilty complex. It had been a while since Harry had last seen the only competent and not evil dada professor he'd ever had, and so he could be wrong, but Harry was reasonably sure that Remus usually looked a good deal shabbier than he did then. Harry would have been thrilled to see him regardless, as he had missed the man a great deal in the 6 years he'd been dead, but the sight of him in brand new robes was just bizarre. Perhaps Sirius would know more. He made a note to speak with his godfather after the feast. Welcome to another year at Hogwarts. Dumbledore greeted them as he stood up. Instantly, the noisy great hall grew silent. I have some staff changes to announce this year. Firstly, Professor Lupin has kindly consented to fill the post of Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. Most people had no idea who Remus was, but once Harry started giving him a standing ovation, the rest of the school soon followed suit. It looked like sheep mentality did come in handy sometimes after all. Remus looked astonished at the applause he was receiving, and Snape's wand kept twitching towards Harry. Harry hid a smile. It looked like the presence of 2 marauders was getting to him already, and he idly wondered whether Sirius had done anything to him yet, or if it was just Snape's well-deserved paranoia kicking in. After all, much as Harry loved Sirius now, when faced with the reminder of the boy Sirius had been at Hogwarts, he was forced to concede that they probably wouldn't have gotten along very well. After all, Sirius was violently anti-Slytherin while Harry rarely sought to provoke anyone as hostility found him often enough, and Harry could never, not even as a first year, imagine being so irresponsible as to try to feed a classmate to a werewolf for the high crime of being annoying. Once the applause had died down, Dumbledore continued, As to our second new appointment, well, I am sorry to tell you that Professor Kettleburn, our Care of Magical Creatures teacher, retired at the end of last year in order to enjoy more time with his remaining limbs. However, I am delighted to say that his place will be filled by none other than Rubeus Hagrid, who has agreed to take on this teaching job in addition to his gamekeeping duties. Harry shot his friends a smug look. After all, they hadn't entirely believed him when he revealed Hagrid's new job to them the day before joining in with the rather tumultuous applause Hagrid was getting, even without him, encouraging his fellow students. We should have known, Ron said thoughtfully after the applause died down. Who else would have set us a biting book? But you did know, Harry protested. I told you yesterday. Like Ginny told you about her owl yesterday? Neville asked pointedly. Touché, Harry acknowledged reluctantly. And now, for our final staff appointment, I am sad to inform all of you that after his many years of quality teaching, Professor Binns has decided to seek out the afterlife, and so history of magic will now be taught by none other than the recently pardoned Sirius Black. Dumbledore gestured to Sirius, who, in keeping with his decision to pretend his prison stint had never happened, looked decidedly confused. Sirius's standing ovation was led by Harry, Luna, and the Weasleys, who had gotten to know him quite well during their month together in Egypt, and halfway through it, the applause was drowned out by fireworks that exploded and spelled out things like Return of the Marauders and Chaos Galore. Harry actually had nothing to do with it, so it must have been all Sirius's doing. Remus, he noted, was looking nostalgic as he watched the fireworks, so there was progress being made on that front. Even better, George Weasley fainted at the knowledge that one of his heroes had returned to the castle. Or he might have been testing one of his inventions. Who really knew? "Why are you guys following me?" Harry asked Fred and George as he made his way to see Sirius. "Good question, Harry," Fred responded jovially. "Better questions. Why did you not tell us that your godfather was one of the Marauders?" George demanded. "I guess it just slipped my mind," Harry replied honestly. "Slipped your mind? Slipped your mind? How could it have slipped your mind?" Fred challenged. "You knew they were our heroes," George added. Harry cocked his head. "Did you guys ever mention that?" he asked curiously. "I don't know," Fred confessed. "Fred?" "I'm not sure, George," George replied. "But he should have known anyway." "Absolutely," Fred agreed. "Well, you know now," Harry pointed out. "My father was Prongs, Professor Lupin is Moony, Sirius is Padfoot, and if you mention Wormtail in front of Sirius, he will probably hex you." "Professor Lupin?" Fred asked incredulously. "I guess he must not be as straight-laced as I thought." "Oh no, he is," Harry assured him. "But he's still awesome, he just needs a little encouragement is all." "Why shouldn't we talk about Wormtail?" George asked. "Who is he?" "Peter Pettigrew," Harry said shortly. "So needless to say, that's kind of a sore subject right now." The twins nodded solemnly as they reached the kitchen. "Why are you meeting him here?" George asked. "Are you meeting him in here?" Fred wanted to know. "Or are you just still hungry?" "Sirius and I like the kitchens. Why not meet here?" Harry asked, tickling the painting of the pears. As the portrait swung open, Harry heard someone who sounded suspiciously like Nymphadora Tonks complaining, "Oh, come on, Sirius. Do I have to spell it out for you?" "You could do that," Sirius said cheerfully. "Or you could just tell me what you're talking about." "Why am I even here?" Remus wondered. "Because you love me, and this is the first chance we've had to catch up seeing as how you've been avoiding me," Sirius reminded him. "I have not been avoiding you. I just hello there," Remus greeted Harry and the twins. "May I help you? Can we have your autograph?" George asked. "And yours, too, Sirius," Fred added. "All right," Remus looked a little surprised, but signed the parchment he was given. "Why do you want my autograph now?" Sirius asked. "I spent August with you guys." "But we didn't know you were Padfoot then," George explained. "Should I be insulted that they didn't recognize me?" Sirius asked Harry, signing his name with a flourish. "Nah, just blame the Raxperts," he advised. Yes, how could I forget about the dreaded Raxperts?" Sirius grinned. "It's why they're so insidious," Harry explained. "So, Tonks, what brings you here? Are you even allowed to be here?" Tonks shrugged. "Don't know, don't care. And don't start preaching about how I should, because God knows students aren't allowed in the kitchens anyway." Harry sighed. Fine, but what are you doing here?" "I'm waiting for Sirius to acknowledge my existence," Tonks explained. "What do you think I've been doing?" Sirius asked. "I think arguing with you about whether or not I know what you're talking about is acknowledging your existence just fine." "That's not what I'm talking about, and you know it," Tonks complained. It occurred to Harry suddenly what she was most likely talking about. "Sirius, you're the head of the Black family," he informed his godfather. "I know," came the confused reply. "What does that have to do with what we're talking about? Did you ever get around to kicking Bellatrix out and reinstating Andromeda and Tonks?" Harry asked. Sirius paused. "That did not occur to me, no. Now that you mention it, though, I will absolutely disinherit Bellatrix first thing tomorrow morning." "And?" Tonks prompted. Sirius looked blank for a second. "And then I don't have to worry about the likes of her tainting my admittedly dark family reputation?" "What about me?" Tonks asked. "Oh, don't worry, I'll reinstate you and your mother, too," Sirius said dismissively. Thank you, Tonks said, looking anything but grateful. Clearly concerned for his fellow marauder's safety, Remus quickly jumped to his feet. Now that that's settled, I'll escort you out. Tonks smiled at him. I'd like that, she said brightly, pleased at having achieved what she'd set out to do. We're going to head back to the common room, too, Fred announced. Don't stay down here too long. We talked to the house elves into sending up food for our back-to-school party, George told him. All right, I'll be there soon, Harry promised them. Once he and Sirius were the only humans left in the kitchen, Harry said, we should make Remus and Tonks spend more time together. They're a really cute couple. I cannot believe the words cute just came out of your mouth, Sirius said, horrified. And why would I want to set Remus up to get Dash, he shuddered dramatically, marrieds. Because at least Tonks isn't boring? Harry suggested. Besides, I miss my godson. Surely you can understand that. I suppose. Sirius agreed reluctantly. Why wasn't Remus on the train this year?
Harry asked.
I looked for him, but I didn't see him. Harry, Sirius said in his best, responsible adult voice. I'm not sure if you've realized this during the 8 years you've attended Hogwarts, but the teachers don't actually ride the train with the students. In fact, the only adults on it are the snack cart lady and the conductor. I know that. Harry rolled his eyes. Although, in retrospect, it is horribly irresponsible to allow the entire Hogwarts population to travel together unsupervised for several hours while able to use magic. Seriously, people could get seriously injured. I've seen people get seriously injured. Hell, I've both been the injurer and the injury in that situation. Oh, and the reason I was asking was because last time Remus was in our compartment with us on the ride to school and saved us from a couple of overeager Dementors. Sirius thought about that for a moment. Well, last time I was a fugitive everyone thought was after you, and there were crazed Dementors on the loose. This year, nothing really happened.
I'm kind of surprised about that.
I guess I expected Pettigrew to escape custody or else, well, Harry trailed off, embarrassed. Sirius laughed at that. What? You expected another prisoner to escape from Azkaban? Maybes? Do you have any idea how difficult it was for me to do it? Besides, I only managed it because I wasn't crazy Dash at this. Harry coughed pointedly, so Sirius quickly amended. Well, not overly so at any rate. I was sort of sane, and I was an unregistered animagus. Now, as you're an animagus yourself, you should know how difficult it is to become one, and not every idiot is capable of becoming one. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if I was the only one in Azkaban. As far as Pettigrew is concerned, you, Ron, and Hermione were 13 the first time that happened. Well, they were probably 14 as it was the end of the year, but still. Ron had a broken leg, we had an unconscious Snape to deal with, Dementors attacked, and top it all off, Remus transformed. That was a very long string of bad luck on top of the fact that it didn't occur to any of us to simply stun him. Wormtail really is rather incompetent, and as we got some competent people involved this time, there was no way he was going to be able to escape. I see, Harry said. So, if there isn't going to be a fugitive out to get me, what are we supposed to do all year? I don't think I actually know how to handle having a school year without any mortal danger. I'm going to reconnect with Remus. You should get to know him as well. I suppose we can have him and Tonks interact during holidays and any weekend she comes by to bother me. You can work on getting Ginny to at least like you, and I fully intend to drive Snape to the brink of madness, Sirius announced. Speaking of Remus, what's with his new robes? I've never seen him in anything new, and it's kind of freaking me out, Harry confided. Oh, that. Sirius waved his concern away. It would seem that Dobby accidentally replaced all of his secondhand things with brand new items after I may or may not have accidentally given him access to my Gringotts vaults and a galleon. How did he react?
Harry wanted to know.
Sirius shrugged. Not well, but what can he do? His old junk is long gone by now. And like I told him, the recent fugitive and Azkaban escapee cannot possibly look better than the normal wizard with a badly behaved rabbit for at least 6 months. Which means at Christmas. Harry trailed off. I'm going to blow everyone away, Sirius confirmed. Of course, Snape laughed at that, but everyone knows that he's just jealous because he has notoriously poor hygiene. Does he? Harry asked. I always thought it was a result of working with so many potions. It is, Sirius nodded. Well, partly. But there are potions that will counteract the effects of all those potion fumes. He just doesn't bother because his hygiene skills have never quite been up to par. Did you happen to tell him that? Because let me tell you, he looked rather homicidal at the feat tonight. What did you do to him? Harry asked curiously. Sirius smirked. Nothing yet. It's going to take every ounce of my considerable self-control, but I want to wait until he's so paranoid he can't sleep before I start in on him. Spoken like a true marauder, Harry grinned. Sirius beamed with pride. Chapter 29. The next day at breakfast, Harry was quietly bemoaning the fact that he'd taken 3 extra classes instead of 2, and how the extra homework would probably kill his social life, while Ginny just rolled her eyes and told him that she was sure he'd manage, when Ron's voice broke through his sulking. Hermione, he was saying, they've messed up your timetable. Look, they've got you down for about 10 subjects a day. There isn't enough time. Look, see this morning? 9 o'clock divination. And underneath, 9 o'clock Muggle studies. And then 9 o'clock arithmancy. How the bloody hell do you think you'll manage that? With a time turner, of course, Harry piped up. I got her one for Christmas last year, maybe? I definitely got her one at some point. Besides, I have to use one to get to both Muggle studies and divination, as it apparently never occurred to anyone that some people might want to take both. Harry. Hermione hissed. We're not supposed to tell people about that. But I already explained all about them when I got you yours, Harry pointed out. I am warning you now, though. If you don't throw a few extra hours in there to sleep and start going crazy and biting everyone's head off, I will be holding an intervention. Are you going to do that? Hermione demanded. Well, no, Harry admitted. But I have 1 extra class. You have like 50. I do not. Hermione huffed. How many classes are you taking? Neville asked curiously. Hermione just crossed her arms and glared at everyone. Besides, Harry continued as if he hadn't been interrupted. While we all think time travel is really cool, who here would like to use it for the sole purpose of doing more schoolwork? Slowly, Percy raised his hand. Oh, you so don't count, Harry told him. Besides, if you were any more responsible, you'd be on faculty. Whatever do you mean? Percy asked him delicately. Since Professor Black's appointment, I was under the impression that there was no such criterion to teach here. Harry shrugged. Got me there. Divination first, do you think? Harry asked Hermione, who nodded, and the pair followed Ron and Neville from the Great Hall. My scar says it knows a shortcut, and given that we're finally taking a class that will be able to utilize its talents, I suggest we listen. Why not? Ron asked. It's not like we have any idea how to get there anyway. With Harry's shortcut, the 10-minute trip only took 7, and all too soon Harry was getting that familiar perfume-induced headache that he really ought to have considered before willingly taking divination again. Welcome, Professor Trelawney said airily as she practically floated into the room. How nice to see you in the physical world at last. She launched into her spiel about the inner eye, and Harry automatically tuned out as he'd already heard some variation of this several times before. You boy. She stopped suddenly, pointing at Neville. Is your grandmother well? Neville looked at her strangely. She was yesterday, he replied. But at her age, who knows what various ailments may befall her? Trelawney nodded approvingly. That's a good attitude to take, especially considering, well, anyway we will be covering the basic methods of… Especially considering what? Neville whispered to Harry. Is she for real? Does she know something? I have no idea, Harry whispered back. Maybe she'll catch a cold or break her ankle or something. Not like that's a big deal, in the wizarding world. By the way, dear, Trelawney looked over at Parvati. Beware a red-haired man. Are you even listening, young man? She asked, suddenly whirling to face Harry. Not really, Harry admitted. But then, I'm sadly bereft of the inner eye. My scar's the one with all the talent, and it's paying plenty of attention. In fact, it's said that there's going to be a Yule Ball next year, and neither Parvati nor her sister should go with Ron, because if they do, he'll completely ignore them in favor of sulking because he accidentally insulted his crush in the process of asking her to go with him at the last minute, and she was already going with a Quidditch star. Harry, Ron complained. You're supposed to be on my side. I am on your side, Harry told him. Which is why I'll make sure to bug you to ask whoever you happen to like next year to the dance right away. Their professor, meanwhile, was eyeing Harry speculatively. You just might succeed in this class, she said softly. Being a seer by proxy is completely unheard of course, but there are some extenuating circumstances in your case, and you having a direct, private link to a seer is more than most people can hope for. Tell me, has your scar made any other predictions that have come true? Harry grinned. My scar said you'd ask that, and as such I've prepared a list. With that, he took out a piece of lined paper. To Hermione's consternation, he and his Muggle-born clients were still using Muggle school supplies where they felt they would be more practical, and the quill and parchment were the first to go, although it did cause some confusion when they were assigned a certain length essay, and the professors just had to guess the equivalent in pages. That was covered in both sides and all the things he'd claimed his scar had predicted over the past 2 years. I see, Trelawney said, sounding impressed as she took the paper and placed it on her desk. She continued to outline the class to the students, and Harry began playing hangman with Ron. Since he couldn't possibly do that during History of Magic this year because he had a guardian to support, he figured he may as well get it out of the way now. Harry looked up as Lavender walked by holding a large silver teapot and placed it on the table in front of Professor Trelawney. Incidentally, the professor said casually, that thing you are dreading, it will happen on Friday the 16th of October. She quickly explained their task for the day, tear-eating, and concluded with a warning to Neville. After you've broken your first cup, would you be so kind as to select one of the blue-patterned ones? I'm rather attached to the pink. You are so lucky, Ron said enviously. I hate pink. Do you think if I break my teacup I can get blue, too? Neville just shrugged. Hey Hermione, be my partner? Sure thing, Neville. Hermione agreed absent-mindedly as she took a sip of her tea. This whole thing sounds very sketchy, don't you think? I mean, it's all so vague. That thing you are dreading will happen Friday the 16th of October. It doesn't even say what it is that Lavender's supposed to be dreading, and unless something happens to go wrong on that day, no one will even remember it. Except you, probably, Ron murmured. Neville snorted but wisely chose not to invoke Hermione's wrath by saying anything. Honestly, Hermione said, irritated. Harry's scar is usually more detailed than that. To be fair, Harry said, hiding a smile. My scar usually only shares its predictions about people I know well, and Professor Trelawney just met us. And chances are that Lavender's going to be dreading quite a bit after a prediction like that, Neville added. She and Parvati have always been pretty superstitious. Humph. Hermione frowned as she turned back to her tea. I'm done, Ron announced, handing over his teacup to Harry. Harry peered into the cup, then quickly consulted his copy of Unfogging the Future. I see the circle, which it says represents a cycle beginning or ending, and a rat, which I'm going to take to mean Wormtail, so you're going to make peace with the fact that Scabbers turned out to be a parent-betraying coward who attacked everyone last year. That's good. I also see a broom. You're either going to be traveling or play a lot of Quidditch. That sounds good to me, Ron said agreeably as he picked up Harry's cup. My turn. Let's see, there's an acorn thingy. It says that means go windfall, unexpected gold, which probably just means you have another money-making idea soon. Wouldn't surprise me. And I also see a dog. Hey Neville, does this look like a dog to you? Let me see, Neville said, reaching over to take the cup and accidentally knocking his own off the table in the process. Whoops. I was supposed to get a blue one, right? Don't bother, Harry said, lazily waving his wand. The cup instantly repaired itself, though the tea dregs were still on the floor. You might want to clean that up, though. Right, Neville nodded as stood to go find a dustpan. Definitely a dog, he said as he paused to look at Harry's cup from over Ron's shoulder. Let's see, a dog is a Grim? Hermione said as she checked the book. Definitely a Grim. Looks like you're going to die, Harry, she said casually. Your concern is touching, really, he replied sarcastically. Did someone save Grim? Trelawney asked eagerly as she hurried towards them. Well, I might possibly have won, Harry conceded. And I know it means impending doom, but it could just mean that someone's out to kill me again. I don't really have anything planned out for this year, but I suppose it's possible someone might try. Or it might just be talking about my godfather. Trelawney stared at him. How could the Grimm represent your godfather? Do you think he is going to die? He better not, Harry said darkly. But what I mean is, he's a dog animagus looks just like that. There's also a key right by it, which means moving, and since Sirius is now my official guardian, and we spent all summer traveling, I have yet to move in with him. I see. Trelawney looked torn between disappointment that it looked like she wasn't going to be able to announce Harry's death after all, and relief that she wouldn't be killing off such a promising seer. Even if it was only by proxy. Okay, you guys go ahead to Transfiguration. Harry and I will meet you there after Muggle studies, Hermione instructed. Why can't you just come with us to Transfiguration and then rewind time to take Muggle studies? Ron whined, not happy at the thought of trying to make his way from the North Tower to Transfiguration with only Neville to guide him. Because after Muggle studies, I still have arithmancy, and I don't trust Harry to have an entire class period free without managing to inspire chaos, Hermione shot back. So wait, we go to Muggle studies together, but then I have to make my way to Transfiguration alone? Harry asked. You trust me to do that? Hermione rolled her eyes. I admit, the plan isn't perfect, but I'm sure you'll manage. Now, let's go. With that, the pair went off down the hall. Once they reached the Muggle Studies classroom, they each took out their time-turners and took themselves back to 9 o'clock. When they entered the classroom, there were only 5 other students there. Terry Boot and Michael Corner from Ravenclaw, Susan Bones and Ernie Macmillan of Hufflepuff, and, oddly enough, Theodore Nott. What are you doing here? Harry asked in surprise as he sat in front of the sole Slytherin. Taking the class, came the terse reply. Can Slytherins do that? Harry was incredulous. Only since Dumbledore became headmaster, Theodore said dryly. Harry scratched his head in confusion. But why would you even want to take it? Isn't your father a Death Eater? Theodore glared at him. For some reason, he had never really liked Harry and had always acted like he was bothering him, which he usually was. But still, if my father were a Death Eater, he'd be in Azkaban. As he is not, we can only conclude that he is not. He's the one who encouraged me to take this class, in fact. He had a misunderstanding with a Muggle once, and the girl shot him twice. Guns aren't legal in Britain, Hermione interjected. He was in Las Vegas, Theodore explained. Las Vegas, Harry said wistfully. I've never been there, but I've heard some nice things. My father wants to make sure that I don't get killed because I know nothing about Muggles, Theodore concluded. Also, he says the way people speak about them as if they're the sort of mythical creatures you'd find in the Quibbler to be embarrassing. That's quite a progressive attitude to take for a pure-blood supremacist, Harry said admiringly. Who said we're pure-blood supremacists? Theodore challenged. In my experience, most pure-blood families remain so as they either know nothing or hate everything about Muggle, Harry answered. What about the Weasleys? Hermione asked innocently. Harry glanced over at her. Have you heard about their squib second cousin they like to pretend doesn't exist? Hermione shook her head. I mean, they claim it's just because he's nasty and resentful of their magic, but it's really a problem perpetuated by society. Imagine not too long ago pure-blood families imprisoned if not outright killed their squib children. Even those that weren't killed were often abandoned, and some had their memories erased. Those that managed to escape that fate still weren't able to go to Hogwarts and often didn't receive a Muggle education, and so, when they became adults they didn't know how to become a member of the Muggle world, and didn't fit in here either. Why do you think Filch is so bitter? Harry asked rhetorically. It's up to our generation to change things, though, and chances are at least one of the 7 Weasleys will marry a non-pureblood. Hermione stared at him the way she always did when he started getting serious. Fortunately, their professor chose that moment to enter the classroom, dressed in jeans and a sweatshirt that said Cambridge on it. Harry vaguely recognized her as Charity Burbage, a woman whose picture had been in the obituary edition of the Daily Prophet following the Second Battle of Hogwarts. Welcome, class, she beamed at that. My name is Professor Burbage, and I am pleased that we have representatives from all 4 houses this year. Before we start, I'm going to need to gauge how much you already know about the Muggle world. For instance, raise your hand if you know what electricity is. Aside from Harry and Hermione, only Theodore not raised his hand. Maybe he was serious about his dad wanting him to have a passing knowledge of Muggles. Interesting. How was Muggle studies? Neville asked as Harry flew into the Transfiguration classroom. And don't worry, you're not late. Good. Harry sighed, relieved. And it was interesting. I actually learned something. Neville raised his eyebrows skeptically. Well, not much, Harry admitted. But considering I didn't think I'd learn anything, it was quite an accomplishment. Hermione chose that moment to slip into the classroom and look around frantically to see if she was late. How was... Ron paused, trying to remember what else she had taken already that morning. Arithmancy. It was great, Hermione said, eyes glowing. I'm going to have to put some real work in, but I think I'll learn a lot. And Muggle studies was fascinating. Professor Burbage really knows what she's talking about. Attention class, McGonagall stood up and began a lecture on animagy. The class listened with rapt interest while Harry doodled on Ron's textbook as he already felt he knew quite enough on the subject, being an animagus himself. He only looked up once he heard the sound of applause and was just in time to see a tabby cat turn back into their professor. McGonagall smiled at the applause, but then her eyes narrowed. That's strange. What's strange, Professor? Hermione asked. I could have sworn you just came from divination, she responded. We did, Ron piped up. Professor Trelawney usually predicts the death of one of her students, and people usually take that rather seriously, McGonagall explained. She tried to predict Harry's death. Seamus volunteered. But then they decided that the dog was probably Harry's godfather and moved on. Yeah, Dean chimed in. She said that since Harry's psychic scar was dependent on Harry for survival, it would probably be able to take care of him. McGonagall closed her eyes at the words, psychic scar, and looked very much like Hermione did when they were being stupid, and she was getting a headache. Finally, she said, I'm glad to hear that none of you will be worrying about dying at any moment. Now, your assignment for today is to turn these rabbits, she gestured to her desk which had a large cage full of white rabbits, into silk hats. Points will, of course, be subtracted if the hats have fur, whiskers, or moves around and your instructions are on the board. After everyone had grabbed a rabbit and started attempting the transformation, McGonagall started walking around the classroom and observing everyone's progress. When she got to Harry's group, she frowned. Hermione had already managed to transfigure her rabbit perfectly, of course, and Ron and Neville were in the process of attempting to transfigure theirs, but Harry's was still a rabbit, though it was dark gray. Mr. Potter, McGonagall frowned. You usually have yours done long before now. Are you having problems? Harry shook his head. Not really. I'm just attempting to do this without a wand. Obviously, it's a work in progress. The professor's frown deepened. May I ask why you're attempting to do this without your wand? Because I already did it normally. See? With that, he waved his wand, and his nearly black rabbit turned into a black hat. He waved it again, and the hat turned back into a white rabbit. Of course. Now I have to start all over. Harry lamented. McGonagall just stared at him, shocked. Did you just manage a silent transfiguration? Whoops. Yes. McGonagall looked a little teary-eyed and was probably caught up in memories of his father, the transfiguration prodigy. Carry on, Mr. Potter, carry on. So, since you're done, do you want to help me? Ron asked hopefully. Harry looked incredulously at him.
Done? I've got even less done than you,
asked Hermione. With that, Harry went back to work turning his rabbit black. After lunch was Care of Magical Creatures with Hagrid. You know, Draco said casually as they all opened their books to page 54, which was the start of the section on hippogriffs. If I hadn't done my own school supply shopping, I might never have known how to open these. Think how embarrassing it would have been to have had to tie a belt around the book, because I didn't know we had to stroke it. But Draco, Harry retorted. I paid Dobby do my shopping and I still know how to do it. Don't you have a psychic scar? Draco asked. I sort of think that's cheating. Meh, Harry shrugged. Once Hagrid was done explaining about hippogriffs, he asked for a volunteer. As expected, no one wanted to get near them until they were sure it was safe. It wasn't like they thought that Hagrid would purposely endanger them or anything, but what was considered safe by a half-giant like Hagrid was a bit different from what was considered safe for a bunch of 13-year-olds. Naturally, then, the burden of volunteering fell on Harry. "I'll do it," he called cheerfully. "Good man, Harry," beamed Hagrid. "Right then, let's see how you get on with Buckbeak." With that, he untied one of the chains and pulled Witherwings, Buckbeak now, out into the paddock. Harry walked confidently towards the hippogriff and bowed deeply, making sure not to blink as he did so. When he looked up, he saw Buckbeak bow just as deeply. It looked like Hagrid was right about confidence paying off when dealing with hippogriffs. He slowly approached Buckbeak and started to stroke its beak. "Well done, Harry," cried an ecstatic Hagrid over the class applause. "Right then, Harry.
I
Reckon he might let I ride him." Harry shrugged. "Sweet." He listened carefully to Hagrid's advice about mounting a hippogriff, and before he knew it, he was flying around the Hogwarts grounds. It wasn't nearly as bad as he remembered, but broomsticks were still infinitely more comfortable. Especially the Firebolt 2000 he'd just gotten a few weeks before getting thrown into the past. As Harry landed, he saw a bright flash and looked over to see Colin Creevey standing there with a camera. He got off of Buckbeak and went over to see what the second year wanted. "I'm on my way to herbology," Colin explained. "Do you think the Prophet would want this as a human interest piece?" Harry considered.
Probably.
Especially considering this is Hagrid's first class after his record was expunged. "Great," Colin beamed. "Expected in the Prophet sometime next week." "Bye, Harry." Later, Colin. Harry waved back as he returned his attention to his class. Emboldened by Harry's success, the rest of the class climbed cautiously into the paddock. Hagrid untied the hippogriffs one by one, and soon people were bowing nervously, all over the paddock. Harry quickly headed over to Draco, Crabbe, and Goyle, who had claimed Buckbeak. "Draco, if you ruin Hagrid's first class for him by insulting Buckbeak when he warned us repeatedly not to do that, then I will officially start a rumor that your mother's not really a Black, as your grandmother was cheating on your grandfather with Abraxas Malfoy, and thus your parents are half-siblings." Draco glowered at him and opened his mouth to protest. "Don't think I won't," Harry warned. "Fine." Draco glared as he stormed off to join Pansy and Millicent, Crabbe and Goyle at his heels. So he may have pissed Draco off, but at least the rest of Hagrid's class passed peacefully and non-violently. Chapter 30. Harry wasn't quite sure what to expect when he walked into History of Magic. That was the only class in which he'd only ever had one teacher for his entire Hogwarts career, as ghosts didn't need substitutes. One thing he did suspect was that falling asleep in Sirius's class would be a very bad idea. Sure enough, Sirius started the class off with a warning against that very thing. "Hello, my name is Professor Black. I used to attend Hogwarts, go Gryffindor. And as such I had to endure my predecessor's teaching as well. Frankly, I don't think I was conscious for any of Professor Bin's lectures, and I understand that many of you have had that same experience. If you want to fall asleep in my class, I will not stop you, but know this. The charms that were mysteriously applied to my classroom recently could very well turn you blue, change your gender, make you unable to use the letter E, force you to speak in sonnets, or something else entirely that we haven't discovered yet. For those of you who don't know how to compose a sonnet, well, you should have stayed awake. I also feel obliged to warn you that those unfortunate enough to disregard my warning found that the hospital wing was quite unable to help them out, and they're just stuck the way they are for an entire week. Any questions before we begin?" Immediately, there was a flurry of hands. "Won't you get in trouble for hexing students?" Lavender wanted to know. "I would," Sirius acknowledged. It were me who was hexing them, and not my classroom." "Why haven't you moved to a different classroom?" Seamus asked. "I tried that with some fifth-year Hufflepuffs," Sirius replied. "It didn't work." "What happened to Professor Binns?" Parvati asked. "Professor McGonagall discovered signs of an exorcism in the castle while I was having my interview with the headmaster, and she quickly discovered that Professor Binns was the only ghost unaccounted for," Sirius explained. "Why were you applying for a position that wasn't likely to vacate anytime soon?" Dean asked. Sirius looked thoughtfully at him. "You're a Muggle-born, aren't you?" Dean looked surprised and a little wary. "Yes, how did you know?" Sirius laughed. I could tell by all the valid questions. You tend to get those more with people less affiliated with the wizarding world. And I was applying because I was hoping that the headmaster would rather have a live teacher than a ghost. The fact I was there when the exorcism was discovered was just good timing. How did you escape from Azkaban? Ron asked. Sirius stiffened. I'm not sure what you're talking about, young man. I've never been to Azkaban in my life, and I challenge you to find any legal documentation that says otherwise. Then where were you for most of my life? Harry piped up, just to be annoying. Majorca, Sirius lied easily. And yet you abandoned me to my magic-hating relatives? Harry asked, sounding horrified. Hey, I got you a firebolt, didn't I? What more do you want? Sirius demanded, crossing his arms. Is the curse just if we fall asleep, or is it also if we're not paying attention? Neville asked. No idea, came Sirius's reply. But do you really want to be letting your guard down in a room that hexes sleeping people? Point, Neville admitted. Are you going to be following Professor Binns' curriculum? Hermione asked naively. Nope, Sirius said cheerfully. All you need to know about the Goblin Rebellions for now is that they keep happening because goblins have a bloodthirsty nature and wizards keep trying to subjugate them, such as the Wand Ban of 1631, which prohibited any magic creatures other than witches and wizards from using wands, although that was probably a reaction to the 1612 Goblin Rebellion that took place in Hogsmeade. Be careful of goblins, kids. They are intelligent, ruthless, and control the money supply. The students stared at him. That was the first mildly interesting any of them had ever heard about goblins, and they were a bit concerned about what might happen to the economy in the event of another goblin rebellion. But enough about that. We can cover goblins when we get nearer to OWLs. Instead, let's talk about Voldemort, Sirius announced. Immediately, the room was filled with gasps and shudders. Are you guys for real? Sirius asked in disbelief. Harry quite understood his astonishment. While it was understandable that people had been afraid to use the appellation of Voldemort at the height of his power, 12 years had passed since then, and no one except Harry knew what a world where Voldemort was running wild was like. So, why in the world were they acting so terrified? Harry had more or less gotten used to everyone's paranoia, but Sirius had been thrown into Azkaban the minute Voldemort died-ish, and had been a fugitive or surrounded by people who actually knew full well the horror Voldemort's reign wrought. Tell you what, Sirius decided. Anyone who can use the word Voldemort in a sentence in front of me without twitching, stuttering, or turning pale gets 50 points, and I'll agree to supervise one of their detentions. Now, to make a note to tell my other classes, he muttered, turning to the chalkboard and writing Voldemort in all capitals across the top. So, we're learning about Voldemort? Hermione asked immediately. We really don't have many facts about Voldemort, Neville chimed in. Just myths and legends. Sirius grinned. 100 points to Gryffindor. Great, Harry groaned. Not only does my godfather apparently hate me, but 2 of my best friends do, too. Don't worry, Harry, Ron tried to reassure him. It's not like I'm going to say it. Maybe not now, Harry conceded. But all things considered, I think we're going to be spending quite a bit of time on He Who Must Not Be Named. Why are you calling Voldemort that? Hermione asked curiously. You never do that. Desperate times call for desperate measures, Harry replied seriously. Now, to cement my place on the hit list of any self-respecting Death Eater, that is, if there were any, I'm going to begin by telling you that Lord Voldemort is an alias for one Tom Marvolo Riddle. Fun fact, if you rearrange the letters of Tom Marvolo Riddle, you get the words, I am Lord Voldemort. So basically the most feared name around is actually just the posturing of a bored teenager who really got lucky that Voldemort means flight from death in French, Sirius said brightly. Also, Riddle was a half-blood who had daddy issues because his mother, a pureblood by the name of Merrippy Gaunt, and who was one of Salazar Slytherin's only heirs, married a muggle also named Tom Riddle after dosing him with a love potion. Merrippy Gaunt eventually deluded herself that her little love slave was really in love with her and stopped feeding him the potion. He immediately left her and their unborn child and went home. There's a lesson to be learned from all this. Can anyone tell me what that is? Don't assume the guy you're feeding love potions is in love with you, and stop. Lavender suggested. Seamus blanched and slowly started inching away from her. Sirius stared at her. I was actually going to say don't drug people with a love potion or always tell your significant other that you are a witch or wizard before the wedding/a child is conceived in case they don't handle it well so you can obliviate them and move on, but that was a good, if creepy, guess. Now, once Riddle left Gaunt lost the will to live, peddled her possessions, gave birth at an orphanage and died. Little Riddle resented being abandoned by his father, and this may have played a part in his strong anti-Muggle sentiments. Additionally, Gaunt's father and brother also passed away, leaving Riddle the only remaining heir of Slytherin. Does that mean that he opened the Chamber of Secrets 50 years ago? Dean asked. Sirius nodded. Yes, he did, and he killed a fellow student of his who many of you may know as Moaning Myrtle from Ravenclaw. Now, does anyone have any questions? Once again, there was a flurry of hands. When Harry got to potions, Snape was nowhere to be found. Lockhart, however, was standing behind Snape's desk, scowling something fierce. Professor Lockhart? Harry asked, somewhat tentatively. What are you doing here? 10 points from Gryffindor for your cheek. Potter, Lockhart said curtly. Harry was puzzled for a moment before the truth dawned on him. Professor Snape? 10 more points for pointing out the obvious, Potter. As pleased as Harry was to counteract Hermione and Neville's huge point draw for saying Voldemort, he knew that to lose 20 points for very little in reason in less than a minute meant that Snape must be pissed. Clearly, Snape's current predicament was Sirius's all fault. He was almost glad that Sirius had finally gone ahead and done something. He was getting worried. What's Lockhart doing here? Neville asked quietly as they started working on their shrinking solutions. It's not really him. It's Snape, Harry whispered back. I think Sirius pranked him. Why? They haven't let go of their Hogwarts rivalry, Harry explained. Of course, in Snape's defense, and I can't believe I just said that, Sirius did bully him mercilessly for years, helped drive away his only friend, and nearly killed him because Sirius really hates Slytherins. Of course, Snape used to be a Death Eater, so maybe that's a reason Sirius is still upset. And so your godfather is still attacking him now? That's kind of pathetic, Neville admitted. Harry shrugged. He ate rats for me. I say let him have his fun. Are you two chatting or working? Snape demanded, storming over. Longbottom, how on God's green earth did you manage to turn your shrinking solution orange? Neville glanced down at his potion, which was indeed orange. Huh, what do you know? It is orange. Isn't it supposed to be green? Indeed, Snape sneered. The effect was kind of ruined by the fact that he still looked and sounded like Lockhart, though, and in fact it was rather comical. Longbottom, at the end of this lesson we will feed a few drops of this potion to your toad and see what happens. Perhaps that will encourage you to do it properly. All right, Neville nodded before knocking his cauldron over. Snape looked murderous. Detention. After he stormed away, Neville murmured, It's a good thing Professor Black volunteered to supervise my next detention. Why'd you knock your potion over, Neville? Hermione asked, shocked. Now you'll have to start over. Neville shrugged. Better that than risking poor Trevor. You'll help me with the next one, won't you? He might still want to do it. Fine. Hermione agreed reluctantly, not wanting any harm to befall Neville's toad, and knowing that potions would never be Neville's strong suit. Is Trevor even down here? Harry inquired. Ron snorted. You think that will stop him? Nice job, by the way, Neville. That was awesome. Thanks, Neville smiled. He'd really come a long way. Harry was really looking forward to his first offense against the dark arts lesson with a teacher that wasn't either a fraud or evil. Or Snape. Although given the fact he pretended to be a loyal Death Eater and the fact that he'd just tried to kill Trevor, both of those points were debatable. He remembered that the first lesson was on Boggarts and that it was in the staff room, but he was still a little thrown off to see Snape, still looking like Lockhart, waiting for them. And he had to be waiting for them, or else he would have put up more of a fuss about leaving or the third-year Gryffinder's presence. Possibly no one's told you, Lupin, but this class contains Neville Longbottom. I would advise you to be on your guard, as he has spent far too much time with Harry Potter and is liable to cause wanton destruction at the slightest provocation. Neville glared defiantly at Snape, but said nothing, not wanting to push his luck. I was hoping that Neville would assist me with the first stage of the operation, Remus said casually. I'm sure he will perform it with minimal collateral damage. Neville looked pleased while Snape amused Harry further by showing him how Lockhart would look curling his lip in disgust before leaving. Have you spotted it, Harry? Remus's voice broke through Harry's mental replaying of how hilarious Snape was when he looked like Lockhart. Spotted what? Harry asked automatically. What advantage do we have over the boggart? Remus repeated. We can neutralize its effectiveness by waving our wands, thinking of something amusing, and saying ridiculous. Harry guessed. Remus frowned. I was actually going to say because trying to frighten multiple people will confuse it and it won't know what form to take, but I suppose that is another advantage. Let's practice the charm without our wands first. After me. Please, ridiculous. Finally, Remus was satisfied that they had the spell down. Right, Neville? First things first, what would you say is the thing that frightens you most in the world? The thought of Harry as Minister of Magic, Neville replied immediately. Hey, Harry protested while the rest of the class laughed. Harry as Minister of Magic. Neville, I believe you live with your grandmother? Sure do, Neville said cheerfully. But she'd be just as scary as Minister. Though obviously for different reasons. No, you misunderstand me, Remus explained. I wonder, could you tell me what sort of clothes your grandmother usually wears? Harry was starting to get a bad feeling about this. Sure enough, 2 minutes later, an older-looking Harry stepped out of the wardrobe, beaming. You know, boggart, Harry said. Monday is probably the most depressing day ever. Let's cancel it. And what's this nonsense about not being able to own a dragon in Britain? I say we give one to anyone with a license.
Oh.
And we can add a dragon tax to the pure blood tax. And how did the ghost community respond to my decree to allow Sir Nicholas into the headless hunt? Ridiculous. Neville shouted, desperately. Instantly, Harry was in drag. He didn't think the sight of him wearing a long, lace-trimmed dress, a towering hat topped with a moth-eaten vulture, and swing a huge crimson handbag from his hand was very funny, but apparently the rest of the class disagreed as they were in stitches. Harry, annoyed by the image and wanting a chance to face the boggart and knowing that Remus wouldn't be inclined to let him, raced forward. There was a crack and, to Harry's surprise, instead of a Dementor there was a flash of bright green light. The killing curse, Harry realized even as he raised his wand and cried, ridiculous. As the Avada Kedavra turned into a light show, Harry mused that he really needn't have bothered as his classmates seemed to find his fear of green light hysterical. Seriously, Harry? Green light? Ron asked through his laughter. It was the killing curse. Harry insisted. I don't want the people I care about to die. I'm sure it is, Harry. Hermione tried to console him, but she couldn't keep a straight face. Fine. Harry crossed his arms. Why don't you try it? Maybe I will, Hermione declared before stepping up the boggart. There was another crack, and McGonagall was standing there, looking disappointed. I don't know what to say, Miss Granger. You had so much potential. Or, at least I thought you did. Now, I don't know what to think. You failed. Everything. We've never had a student fail everything before, and so we're kicking you out of Hogwarts. Hermione screamed. Hermione, Ron ran up to her. It's just a boggart, remember? This isn't real. Imagine she can only speak in sonnets like Professor Black said. Hermione closed her eyes and, voice shaking, shouted, "Are ridiculous." For a moment, nothing happened, then McGonagall continued her rant Shakespeare style. Miss Granger, I just don't know what to say. You've failed everything, and that is the truth. Now you must leave Hogwarts at once today. Education is wasted on you youth. You're a disappointment and a disgrace. No one's ever failed everything before. How dare you even stay and show your face? Foolish girl, hurry and run out the door. Honestly, you're better off a muggle. Of course you are clearly so very dim that even that will end up a struggle. I'm telling you now your future is grim. This is really for your own good, my dear. That I'm now throwing you out on your rear. Ron smiled reassuringly at Hermione before he stepped up to face the boggart. Crack. McGonagall turned into a 6-foot-tall spider covered in hair and clicking its pincers menacingly. Ridiculous! Ron yelled after only a moment's hesitation. The spider's legs vanished, and the boggart rolled Lavender's way. "Thanks, Ron," Hermione said quietly as they watched their classmates deal with the boggart. "Don't worry about it," Ron told her. "Seriously, don't. You're brilliant. You're the smartest person I know, except for Dumbledore and, sometimes, Harry. They would never throw you out. Let's give them a moment, shall we?" Harry suggested, pulling Neville off to the side. "Neville, finish it," Remus called. Neville stepped up to the boggart, and it turned back into Minister Harry. Ridiculous. The minute that boggart was in address, there was a loud flash. Harry spun around and groaned when he saw Draco Malfoy standing at the door, holding a camera. Draco grinned. "Payback's a bitch, Potter." Thank you for joining us on this time-twisting journey at Grimoire Audiobooks. We've reached the end of Part 3, Chapters 21 to 30 of Harry Potter and the Masters of Time by Sarah 1281. This fanfiction has taken us through an unforgettable adventure filled with humor, surprises, and the delightful chaos of meddling with time. If you've enjoyed this part, don't forget to show your love by liking and sharing your thoughts in the comments. With 25 likes and 25 comments, we'll bring you the next thrilling installment of this epic tale. Dizzy, stay connected. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next part or any of the other magical adventures we bring to life. Thank you for being a part of the Grimoire Audiobooks family. Until next time, keep the magic alive and the laughter rolling. See you soon for more enchanting stories.